I'd like to welcome everyone to our electronic council meeting on April 21st, 2021. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Regional Council is practicing physical distancing, and I am present in the council chambers. All other members are participating electronically. In the interest of time, we have assigned a mover and a seconder, and I will read these out, and then I will state the result of the vote. I would like to acknowledge that Mike Mann is now sitting on Regional Council as Deputy Mayor of the City of Cambridge, and he will be representing Catherine McGarry while she recovers from surgery. Unfortunately, Councillor Mann was here earlier for our in-camera session, but had to leave because he has a conflict. I would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather today virtually is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today, their achievements, and their contributions to our community. I would now ask Tim Brubaker to do roll call.
Thank you, Chair Redmond.
Councillor,
perfect. Councillor Armstrong.
Present.
Councillor Clark.
Present.
Councillor Erb.
Present.
Councillor Foxton.
Present.
Councillor Galloway.
Present.
Councillor Harris.
Present.
Councillor Jaworski.
Here.
Councillor Jowett.
I think she froze, Tim.
I was going to say, I can see your picture. We'll mark her as present. Councillor Kiefer.
Here.
Councillor Lorenz.
I'm here.
Councillor Mann is not. Councillor Nowak.
Present.
Councillor Shantz.
Here.
Councillor Strickland.
Here.
And Councillor Verbanovich.
Present.
And we'll check again on Councillor Jowett. Councillor Jowett, are you able to hear us? Okay, perfect. I can see you're waving. All right.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
All present except Councillor Mann.
Thank you very much. We'll now have a motion to reconvene in open session. This is moved by Councillor Armstrong and seconded by Councillor Clark. I would ask you to please use your icons to vote yes or no that Council reconvene in open session. Thank you, colleagues. That's carried. We're just going to take one moment before I recognize Councillor Jowett and acknowledge that this is National Volunteer Week, and underscore the fact that volunteers are simply the gas in the engine of our community. And in less than 24 hours, when we asked for volunteers to help with our vaccine initiative, we had over 800 people offer. And those volunteers have helped get shots in arms throughout our community, and we are eternally grateful to them and the other people that do an absolute myriad of volunteering. So we would like to simply say, thank you to all of the volunteers. Has our Kodak moment ended, Van? Thank you very much, colleagues. I would now ask if there are any declarations of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, and I believe, Councillor Jowett, you were indicating that you had one. Go ahead.
Thanks so much, Chair Redmond. I'd like to repeat my conflict of interest from the previous meeting. Today is Committee of the Whole for April 21st. The employment land conversion will be raised again. The provincially significant employment land conversion through the MCR and the regional official plan impacts my owned property at 215 Holiday Inn Drive in Cambridge, Ontario. And I appreciate this going on record. Thank you so much.
That is duly noted, and we'll flag that when we're at that point in the agenda. Thank you, Councillor Jowett. We have no presentations, no petitions, but we do have delegations. So before commencing with hearing from delegations, I would like to remind all delegations of some guidelines for participation. Please leave your video or camera turned off and your microphone audio muted until you are called on to speak. The first delegation is a group and has been allocated 10 minutes to speak. The remaining delegations will have 5 minutes each to speak. We would ask that you leave the meeting once your issue has been addressed, and you are more than welcome to watch the remainder of the meeting on the webcast live via YouTube. I'd also just like to indicate that if you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, and I'm sure this won't happen tonight, it will result in immediate removal from the meeting. Interrupting councillors, staff, or other delegations, derogatory statements about councillors, staff, or others, turning your camera on at inappropriate times, and anything that is hate speech or defamatory comments. I would now like to call on the delegations as they are listed in the agenda, and the first group is Rory Farnan, Secretary, and Samantha Lernout, President, Citizens for Safe Groundwater, and this is regarding the Jackson Harvest Farms proposal, the Hallman pit application. Welcome, Rory and Samantha. You have 10 minutes.
Good evening, Madam Chair, councillors, staff, and those watching online. I just tried to start my video, but I wasn't able to. So that's all right. I'm going to share my screen anyways. On behalf of Citizens for Safe Groundwater, I would like to thank you for your time this evening. So first off, we would like to acknowledge the efforts and time of regional staff to accommodate our requests to connect about issues identified with the Hallman pit application. While we appreciate the commitment to review our concerns, we are here tonight in an effort to ensure the utmost transparency and public engagement in this zone change application process. So we're going to try to give some background information for those of you who are not familiar with this application. But first off, in addition to Citizens for Safe Groundwater's review of the proposed Hallman pit zone change application, we are also playing a role in the region's official plan review, which you may remember us from a while back. Protecting water and prime farmland while planning for our projected growth is foundational, as food and water are two essential pillars to our continued regional economic prosperity.
Good evening. Thank you. Prime, protection, sensitive. An established community whose health and well-being is threatened with the potential of constant dust, noise, and truck pollution. This is unthinkable given the current environment where residents are being told to work from home and educate in their backyard. Underneath our crown jewel, the Waterloo moraine, an aquifer below supplying 14.9 billion liters of water to the region's Shingletown well system. There are a multitude of impacts that have been identified through our team of experienced experts, the GRCA, and those commissioned by the region that are left unresolved. Tonight, we will only focus on a few of the outstanding items listed in our 4-page comment that was included in your agenda package.
So just to touch on some of this is a very busy slide. Please note that this is here for your review purposes. Due to time and attention limitations, we will not get into detail with these issues tonight. Each of the categories that are listed have inadequacies in the application, whether it's expert identified or policy related. This makes it incredibly difficult to feel confident that this application can move forward. We are hopeful Council will comment tonight on the importance of addressing our concerns. This is not a benign zone change application. So just to touch on that first one that was highlighted, air quality assessment report. This is missing from the Hallman pit application. Rezoning applications under the Planning Act must conform to the provincial policy statement, and especially S1.2.6. The active application for a gravel pit in Maryhill, as you can see the site plan on the right, included an air quality assessment report and third-party review commissioned by the region, presumably in an effort to conform to this policy. With approximately 50 homes in Shingletown and over 20 properties within the 120 meter setback. Those are the sensitive receptors. How is the same level of scrutiny not being applied here? Without identifying these impacts to air quality, how can you put forward a dust management plan to protect the health of these sensitive receptors? This feels like building a house without a complete set of blueprints. What is the existing air quality surrounding this proposed Hallman pit? What is the projected impact due to both extraction and repurposing operations? How could this affect residents' long-term air quality? Can another pit be added to this area with acceptable impacts to air quality for the sensitive receptors without impacting their health? These questions and impacts can only be addressed with the completion of a proper air quality impact study that is peer reviewed. Not conforming to the PPS when proposing a change in land use that conflicts with existing land use is an unacceptable precedent to set in our region. This is not a benign zone change application.
Citizens need assurances that municipal zone change applications receive the highest scrutiny from all governing bodies. As Ms. Davey suggested at last month's GRCA meeting, our strong approach to cumulative impacts is a critical process to ensure we protect our most sensitive natural assets and establish communities. Addressing cumulative impacts is essential in understanding how incremental effects can lead to broader impacts of an area. Evidence-based decision-making dictates this study be comprehensive, transparent, and with complete data. Here is a visual of the existing area pits and their close proximity to the proposed Hallman pit. There are several which at present are underutilized. This is important to understand, as a sudden spike in activity could have a holistic negative impact. For those whose frame of reference is not a country block, please take a moment to situate yourself with this map of downtown Kitchener, Waterloo, and surrounding area. Now, with an overlay of the proposed Hallman pit, along the pits already licensed in the area. This illustrates the collective negative cumulative impact of aggregate operations to the region's sustainable food sector and to one of Waterloo Region's critical sources for drinking water. To date, CSGW is still encountering missing reports, missing data, unanswered questions, and an incomplete process. This includes a rehabilitation plan not accepted by the region's peer expert review, as required by legislation. This leads us to draw the conclusion that the cumulative impacts review is not yet complete at this time.
In a recent letter addressed to Chair Redmond, Wilmot Mayor Armstrong, and Citizens for Safe Groundwater, Waterloo MPP Catherine Fife has lent her support of Citizens for Safe Groundwater's position of the Hallman pit and any application that poses any risk to our groundwater supply in the region. It is our position that our region shall use the precautionary principle while looking at such an application in an area that is essential to providing our growing and flourishing region with drinking water. No risk is acceptable when it comes to public access to clean, safe drinking water. The region is a leader and at the forefront of water protection, as many of you know. With the hard work and investment of countless lawyers, experts, and policymakers in the development and practice of the Source Protection Plan, we now are beginning to understand water protection and risk management. We are aware of a new We are not aware of a new application for a gravel pit in the region, or the province for that matter, since the collection of data and enactment of policies of the Source Protection Plan in 2016. This may be a precedent-setting application for a gravel pit atop the wellhead protection area for municipal wells. With all that we know now, since 2016, we must move forward in the right direction.
In addition to our concerns with the zone change application, we also believe the Shingletown Well project is an important topic to bring to tonight's discussion. The region plans to spend millions to enhance the quality of water that is drawn from the same aquifers that are sitting beneath the proposed property. Given the region's projected need for increased capacity from these wells, is council comfortable with a marginal level of protection from breach and possible contamination?
Rory and
In
Samantha.
this process,
Sorry,
we
Rory
have
and
heard-
Samantha, your time is up. Can you conclude, please?
yeah, we have two slides, Madam Chair.
Excellent.
if you
Okay.
could-
I would move that
Thank
we
you.
give them another 5 minutes.
You've complete your presentation, Rory and Samantha.
Thank you,
Okay.
Madam Chair. In this process, we have heard the term commenting body only being used to explain the role of the region of Waterloo. As a resident of this region, I cannot accept this statement. We are at a pivotal crossroad where regional leadership, transparency, and commitment to this process is of the utmost need. A real opportunity exists with this zone change application for government and citizen collaboration. Let's not let this opportunity pass us by.
So in conclusion, Citizens for Safe Groundwater is requesting that the highest level of scrutiny and transparency be provided with this application. The community of Shingletown, Wilmot Township, and our region as a whole are depending on it. This is in Wilmot right now, but it is not a Wilmot problem. The precedent this pit could create permeates all of our region. If it is not on your doorstep right now, which I know it is for some of you, it very well could be soon. This application is simply sets an unacceptable precedent for water protection, sustainable food systems, and the health and safety of our established rural communities. Take a stand to make sure this is the precedent. This is a precedent that you can stand behind for your constituents, if not for the health and well-being, for the protection of food and water for generations to come. Thank you for your time, and thank you for the time to finish. Sorry for taking extra time.
Thank you very much. Great presentation. Councillor Rents, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a couple of questions for the delegation, if that's okay. Yes?
Yes, go ahead. Of the delegation, absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you both for the great presentation. It was really well put together. We were able to view it in our presentation slot, so I know you skipped over some of the stuff because of the time limits, but it's really well done. You'd mentioned a letter from Catherine Fife that we all received. I'm wondering what support or what has Mike Harris, your local MPP, been able to give you? Any kind of support, or what is he saying about this? Is he on board, or?
Rory, would you like me to answer, or would you like to?
Go ahead, Samantha.
I'll say. So at the very beginning, Mike Harris Jr. came out to meet with us, and we discussed the concerns that we had, and he listened. Since then, I actually personally have met with him once with another citizen group. And he sent his his right-hand man out to one of our community meetings, but we have not received any support beyond that. We have actually, since that last meeting that he sent his second-hand man out to, he has not returned phone calls or emails, and we have been unable to connect with him.
Rory, did you want to add to that?
I know that's okay, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Rents.
Yeah, just you had listed a number of things that you thought was the regional's responsibility. So I'm not sure if the air quality testing is the region's responsibility or is that the townships? And you gave a list of a number of things that you believe the region needs to still supply or is lacking. Is that correct? Is there anything else, or have you gotten any kind of response from our staff as to when they're going to fulfill those requests or give you some information on those items?
Yes. So first question, the air quality, it would be under the, to our knowledge, it is under the region's responsibility at this point in time, because the region took on the responsibility of commissioning the peer review of to dust. So with this application, it was a dust management plan. There was no air quality assessment, which assesses the impacts. So what's required, just like with noise, there's a noise impact study. There must be an air quality impact study. A dust management plan comes, to my understanding, comes after. So first of all, you need to identify the impacts to know how to mitigate them. To just put forth a mitigation plan is the second step. And it doesn't identify the baseline existing conditions, is my understanding of what's been told to me from the expert that we have commissioned. And when you look at the PPS, that one that I mentioned, that's exactly what it describes, that when you're looking at a zone change application, it requires an air quality assessment. If it was just a license and there was no zone change application required, then you don't need to go to the PPS. You just, there's a lot less work that needs to be done. But because there's a community here, it would definitely make sense. And we are aware that in the pre-consultation meeting minutes, the planner for the township of Wilmot proposed that could be an issue. As far as other things that the region's responsibility is, they also took to our understanding, the region took responsibility for commissioning the peer review of the noise. There's also issues identified with that have not been resolved. And the region commissioned the peer review of the agricultural impacts, which resulted in a non-acceptance from the expert that reviewed that. And the region did an internal review of the road impacts, which again, experts identified issues that have not been resolved or addressed. And the region did an internal review of the water, the hydrogeology, and that is confusing because the cumulative impacts have not been addressed. So I'm not quite sure how anything has been signed off without the cumulative impacts being addressed, because the cumulative impacts apply to all of the various reports. Hope that answers your question.
If I could just add quickly to the dust question, Councillor, there is an active application in another township right now, of which the region is playing a similar role. And those reports, the reports that Sam is referring to in terms of the baseline studies and the actual air impacts, are basically being done for that active application right now, and not the Hallman pit. So, from our perspective, whatever the region, and I know that not all applications are the same, but when it comes to dust, as we've shown in our slide, the amount of potential affected citizens whose houses are almost, some of them engulfed by the 120 meter setback line, 120 meters, and we're not even going to get baseline dust readings and understand what issues there may be. We just want to feel that we're getting the same amount of attention as other active applications that are being reviewed by the region today. But with the fact that we have the potential for more sensitive receptors than some of those applications that are in front of staff at this moment in time.
Councillor Rents, do you have any further questions of the delegation?
No, it seems like a reasonable request, though. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Foxton, please go ahead.
Thank you. A few things. Thank you so much, you guys. I know this is a lot of work and a lot of stress on you guys, and you've done an amazing job. But you've also educated me in a few things I need to do to further protect if I'm able to. You keep calling a cumulative impact. The Minister of Natural Resources and Forest has multiple times turned down, as well as OMB has turned down, doing a cumulative impacts in aggregate. It's not allowed. And I'll tell you, in North Dumfries, we have a concession block, and it is owned by 6 different aggregate industries, and we cannot use a cumulative impact. So for this 5 kilometers square, it's 6 different pits, and we can't say the dust from this pit and the dust from this pit creates so much dust. It's not allowed. So we're still fighting that, as you know, but a cumulative impact is not allowed in regards to aggregate. I'm going to turn, after we're done questions to you guys, I'm going to ask some questions of Michelle Sergey, because she has some answers for us in regards to some of the things you were stating. And some of the things I've heard tonight will definitely lead to changes. But we're not there yet, but we will be doing something. So I thank you for the work you've done.
Thank you, Councillor Foxton. I will come back to you if you want to ask questions of staff after we're done asking the delegation questions.
Yes.
And the delegation, you're free to stay and hear the questions of staff. Councillor Kiefer, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Redmond, and thank you, Samantha and Rory, for the presentation. I'm curious to know how you feel that the source protection is doing in this regard. I believe they're part of.
Yes, so it's a complex one for us to understand as citizens. We're doing our best. What I've learned through this process so far is there is an extra layer of review that's done because of the source protection plan. That being said, I understand that the region's walking a fine line here as the regional staff are walking a fine line as they try to use policy that exists and policies that should exist with the province. So I don't feel that it's gone far enough, that's for sure. And the other big thing here that the big missing piece with the source protection plan is that there are municipal wells and there are also private wells, and there are also agricultural uses of water, and there are also trout farms, and there's a whole bunch of other uses of water. So the source protection plan, like I said, just started in 2016. It's very preliminary. From what I've learned through speaking with lawyers at CLAC and through various experts that I've spoke to, it's at its early stages. So region, we are grateful that we are at the forefront of water protection, which we must be because we are a region that relies on groundwater. So complex question. Rory, maybe you have more to add to that. I don't have a solid answer. I think cumulative impacts is another big piece that ties in with it, because a lot of these pits were licensed before the source protection plan was enacted in 2016, and they're below the water table. And then with vertical zoning happening recently, and with municipalities not being able to control vertical zoning, there's added risks because you lose control over this property once you rezone it, and you don't know whether or not this is going to go below the water table. And the only way that you are able to stop that is by appealing it at that point in time. When the applicant does decide to request to go below the water table, and then you don't have an opportunity to review a below the water table pit. So it's a complex question. Thank you, Councillor Kiefer, for asking that. I could talk for hours about it, and there's no.
Thank you for the response.
Straightforward answer.
If I could just add a piece, Councillor, and thank you for the question. I think to some extent, there has to be political will to protect our ground, especially in an area that is drawing billions of liters annually, that provides water to every community in this region. So the question is, what are you going to do and how far are we going to go to protect probably the most important asset for our growth? Do we need aggregate? Sure, we need aggregate. Do we need water? Way more. If we're going to sustain the level of growth that we're talking about as a region, and if we're not willing to have political will and take a stand, then God bless. But this issue is way too important, and we have an opportunity here, and the township has an opportunity here. We have a zone change, prime farmland. Only 5% of the province's landmass is prime farmland. We have an opportunity here to stand up, not only for our prime farmland, which, by the way, as we mentioned in the report, the agricultural peer review by the region's expert says no scientific evidence, agree to disagree, and not completed. There are ways that we can stop this, and we can take a stand for the billions and billions of water that we rely upon from these wells in this area every year for the next decades. And the fact that we are going to be spending millions of dollars to upgrade the facilities that take water from this region, why are we allowing these types of actions to take place? We need to stand up and we need to protect this asset and the millions of dollars that we're about to drop in upgrading these wells. So it comes down to political will and the will to fight when the policy isn't there to protect us. And quite frankly, the township needs the region at this point in time. The township does not have the resources or the funds to be able to fight this alone. It needs the region of Waterloo. The region of Waterloo needs to step up to the plate.
Thank you both for the response. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Galloway, I saw your hand up and then I went down. Did you change your mind, or was I seeing a ghost hand?
No, you saw my hand, but I'm going to wait until we get the staff.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Clark, please go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. And thanks for the presentation. In the presentation, I heard a lot about the studies that your group feels are needed, and that's fine. In your comments, though, you talked about, speaking to Rory here, you talked about not being willing to accept the statement that we're a commenting authority and wanting us to take a stand. Those seem like two different things to me, and I'm not clear on what stand you think we can take.
Who would like to take that, Samantha or Rory?
I'm happy to comment on that, and Sam, if you'd like to add. To be suggested that you're only a commenting body when there is the opportunity to collaborate with the township at LPAT, when there is an opportunity to take on reports like warrant extraction, when there's reports like dust and noise and traffic. I'll give you an example about the traffic. We have an expert that's known to the region, top safety expert, one of the top safety experts in the province. And the report for 2 regional intersections, which he has a very serious concern for the safety of, was basically written off within 30 days. Now, take what you want out of that. There are policies and there are resources, and there is an opportunity for the region, to be a commenting body and suggest to the township that this application be denied. And then there is an opportunity beyond that to step up if and when the applicant wants to challenge that zone change decision, and making sure that citizens and the township are backed up with resources and the political will to be able to take on that process. Because I think one of the big problems with our townships, especially now with 19 where revenues are stretched. We need the region to be a part of the process. And quite honestly, the region has much more muscle to flex than some of our townships. And I believe that there's a real opportunity for collaboration when you have MPPs standing up, when you have citizen groups standing up, and there's a real sense that there is a threat to, again, the region's probably most important asset, being water. 80 to 90% of our water comes from underground aquifers. This one, billions of liters. I mean, it's billions of liters. So the role is commenting, but the role is standing up and taking charge.
Samantha, did you want to add to that?
Just quickly to summarize. So yes, the role, this comment is very, very significant. And this comment comes after the region fulfills its responsibility that it took on when it took on the responsibility to commission the review of all of these reports. So it is the region's responsibility to comment, yes, but before they comment, it is the region's responsibility to ensure that this application is complete and that it conforms to the PPS, and it's the region's role to represent the needs of the region as a whole. It is a need for aggregate, is a need for another gravel pit in the area. Like, just if you have a visual of that map in your mind of the cumulative impacts with all the orange, if the region really needs aggregate, that whole area of orange is currently only operating at 10%. If the region needs aggregate, then that could be an ideal place to get it from. Why are we licensing another pit that backs onto a community, that comes down a township road that's used by cyclists and it's a recreational road to an intersection that's dangerous, sitting on top of our regional recharge area for the Wilmot Wells on prime farmland?
Thank you, Samantha. Councillor Clark, do you have any further questions?
I understand. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jowett, please go ahead.
Redmond, and hi, Samantha. I did try to call you back today.
I know, I heard that. I see you. I hear you. I understand.
Okay. And hi, Rory. Welcome to both of you again.
Hi.
I've always enjoyed.
Thank you.
I've always enjoyed the astuteness of your technical capacity and your passion in this subject matter. We are trying. I mean, we put a firecracker out there at Tapmo when we put Sue in charge of that intentionally, and I know the GRCA has been trying to fight this fight along with you. We also know that we have to take a little bit more holistic approach to some of this work, and if cumulative effects is something that's of real relevance, which we are definitely trying to communicate to people, then maybe we need to find new ways of getting through some of this information so that we can be more preventative or proactive to resolve. So really, I know it's a big problem, Source Protection Committee. I mean, if you could just sit through some of their meetings, it's quite painful. They're doing their best work. It's just such a big mountain to push. It's so incredibly important and critical, our water protection. But it just seems like it's been such a beast for so long. So I do appreciate you staying the course, and at any time you want to reach out, Samantha. And I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to connect with you today. But just keep doing what you're doing, and I think you'll be pleased to know just how collaborative Michelle Sergi is and how advanced her capacity is technically in this regard as well. So we're finding our way through this. I know it's been painful, but appreciate your tenacity and dedication, both of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jowett. I'm going to go back to Councillor Galloway and then Councillor Foxton. So thank you, both Rory and Samantha, for a concise, focused, and very informative presentation. It was very well done. We are now going to go to staff questions. So Councillor Galloway, you have the floor.
Well, thanks, Madam Chair. And maybe before I ask Michelle a question, I would want to also thank Samantha and Rory for, and their entire group for all the great work that they're doing Water is one of our most precious commodities. 80 to 90% of our water comes from groundwater. So we have a huge stake in these kinds of policies and decisions. So thanks for your advocacy on behalf of the community. But to Michelle, Michelle, can you just give us or give me just some idea of where the process is and kind of the players and the timelines for the process as this goes through, the zone change goes through its process, and then potentially, I suspect, quite probably an LPAT.
Ms. Sergi?
Through you, Chair Redmond, thank you, Councillor Galloway, for the question. So staff are still in the process of reviewing the application and all of the background studies associated with the application. We've made some progress associated with our review. We have some other technical matters that we're looking at with our peer reviewers and in-house. But we do believe that we will be in a position to issue final comments probably within the next month and a half, 2 months to the township. Our understanding is that once we provide our final comments to the township, they'll be posting them on their website for a period of about 2 months for public review, in which case then they'll be bringing a report forward to Wilmot Township Council. I don't believe that is a decision-making report, but it is a report, and then the decision would come sometime after that. And then once the decision is made, whether it's a refusal or if it's an approval of the zoning bylaw amendment, there would then be the opportunity for either the applicant or third parties to appeal.
Councillor Galloway, do you have further questions?
Yes, I do. Thanks for that, Michelle. So yes, we are a commenting agency on this, as you described to us before, but obviously we have a huge stake in water, because we have the responsibility to source water, treat water, and distribute it as the wholesaler of water. So we have a huge stake in this, and of course we're guided, as I understand, by provincial policy, which is very significant when it comes to this particular matter. There are policies that we have some control over, and of course there are some policies, and in particular in this regard, for zone change, that the townships have control over. And indeed, we know that not all the townships, the very same policies. So what might happen in one township when it comes to a gravel pit may be a little different than in another township. And that's, I guess, one of the joys of our two-tiered system. And so, but to what extent, Michelle, can we push the envelope in terms of provincial policy, township policy, and even our own policies when it comes to these kinds of matters? I mean, do we have much latitude? Can we go outside normal maybe bounds and expect some higher standards or higher requirements than might normally be required? Or are we, because it just seems to me that would be a good thing if we can, and certainly we want to have some of those policies maybe find their way into our official plan eventually, into the plans and zoning bylaws of the townships as well. So I don't know if there's an answer to that question, Michelle, or not, but I'm curious, because when it comes to water, we certainly do want the highest possible standards for gravel pits and not just gravel pits, of course, all different types of land uses that we have concern about when it comes to protecting our water, our groundwater.
Ms. Sergi?
Through the chair, aggregates is probably one of the most challenging areas of planning and the most challenging applications to deal with. from a planning perspective and from all the technical expertise perspectives. It is well, maybe not the one area of planning, but certainly one of the areas of planning that is most highly regulated in terms of how we go through both the planning and the Aggregate Resources Act process. There is not as much latitude with these types of applications as there are on other types of applications. And so that's embedded throughout provincial legislation. So that's the Planning Act, the PPS, the Greenbelt Plan, the Clean Water Act. So for example, in the Clean Water Act, aggregate extraction is not recognized as an activity of concern. That's not quite the right language, but that's essentially what it is. It's not something that we can prohibit or regulate. And so it's a very challenging component. I mean, as regional staff, the technical review that we are responsible for, particularly in this case, where we're not the approval authority, very seriously, and apply as much rigor as we can within the parameters that we're working within. I think that one of the things we have done is with the regional official plan review, we've sort of split it into two parts. There's the growth component and the non-growth component. And one of the reasons for that is to give us just that little bit more time to spend exploring opportunities with aggregate policies and seeing where we can go to try to improve the overall process.
Councillor Galloway?
Yeah, no, thanks very much, Michelle. I know it's a really difficult one. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Foxton. You had expressed an interest in going to staff, and then we'll go to Councillor Shantz and Councillor Lorenz.
Thank you. So as I understand it, Michelle, we discussed, and Wilmot's official plan and the regional official plan match on the methodology in analyzing aggregate. And the reason the Maryhill one was different was because of the official plan in Woolwich that added another measure in. So basically, what I understand is we create laws, and these laws are put down into our official plan, and they are the parameters by which we live by. If we wanted to change those laws, we have to wait until a new official plan comes up and then make the changes, or it has to be requested by the public. But we have to live within the boundaries of our official plans as of right now. That would be correct. Ms. Sergey?
Ms. Sergey?
Through the chair, that would be correct, yes.
So, and that's exactly what's happened in this situation. Right or wrong, we were living by our laws. And as a staff person, you can't break those laws. The only one that can ask for a change would be council as a whole. And I'm not even sure we can change our official plan. We have to wait until our official plan is up for review again. So I tried to explain this, and I've tried to explain this to several people in the past, that we have to live by the laws that are, and that is the way we must do business. If they need to be changed, then we have to make those changes at the time of official plan review, which I believe is right around the corner. So we will have to keep our eye on that. There was another thing. There was the one map that Rory put up. And did you see all the green water? That's the one I told you where they went below the water table, pit after pit after pit, and they don't allow cumulative impact. And so you saw the dead water. And another final point I'd like to make, and Rod McGeary and Michelle have told me several times, 96% of our water is groundwater. 96%. When I first got on council back in 1997, 98, we were talking about a pipeline to the Great Lakes and the fortune it would cost us. But we found a way to do water better, and that was using the groundwater. And we hired staff to create a system that would keep our water protected. And now we must carry on that protection. So I just wanted to clarify those things, though, that we are living by the letter of our laws, and that at official plan review, we can change those laws. Correct, Michelle? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. And Councillor Shantz, please go ahead.
Thank you. I think Councillor Lorenz was ahead of me, but
Oh, sorry.
okay.
You haven't spoken yet, Councillor Shantz. I will get to Councillor Lorenz. I promise.
Much has been said that I'm not going to repeat, but I wanted to highlight a little bit about responsibilities, and Sue just did a pretty good job of doing that. Who's responsible for what? But I understand that there were changes in authority recently, and so I wonder if we could just get that clarified a little bit. I know in the previous government, we were making some inroads in some of the policies we were able to put in place, and some of those have been kind of walked back and changed. So I wonder, Ms. Sergi, if you could speak to that a little bit.
Ms. Sergi?
Through you, Chair Redmond, there was a review of both the Aggregate Resources Act as well as some of the regulations. There had been some expectation previously, particularly with dealing with pits below the water table, as well as when you move from a pit, get approval for a pit above the water table, and then, subsequently, sometime after, go below the water table for significant improvements in that process because we were effectively cut out of it. There were some minor improvements in that process, but unfortunately, the expectations that we had originally had with respect to some of those changes did not come to pass once the regulations were dealt with.
Councillor Shantz, any further questions?
No, I don't think so. I just re-emphasize the need to work together. I mean, this is a difficult group to a difficult issue to sort of get through, especially as smaller townships, and it affects us mostly. I'm not sure if there's any pits in the cities or not, but it certainly affects us, and we don't have a lot of resources to go to LPAT and do some of those things. So working together is key.
Thank you, Councillor Shantz. Councillor Lorenz, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to take a little walk down memory lane. I was on regional council when Walkerton took place, the disaster that happened there. I was also on regional council when we made the decision not to build a pipeline to any of the Great Lakes and to, in fact, build the Mannheim recharge system. And that has worked out quite well for us. I think it's really important as the region that is the classified by a number of people. In fact, Ken Sealing would be the first one to tell you that we are the world leaders in groundwater. And for these kinds of things to even have any impact on the aquifers in our region, I think is a real travesty. So I'm quite concerned about this. I think that we have limited ability to do what we can at this time, but I would hope that our staff would think long and hard and be able to work with the township and try to resolve any of these inconsistencies or inequities that are in the reporting system. And this isn't just going to impact the residents of Wilmot, it's going to impact the residents of our region. And there's no question in my mind, and I think we have to think that way. And once we open up the floodgate, you'd be surprised how many other people will try to use the same pathway to do that. So I think we really, really need to be careful. Some people that are listening to this may say, well, this is a NIMBY thing, not in my backyard. But I would say Mr. Farnan, who made the presentation earlier, lives in Mannheim. So I think all residents of the community should be very worried about the impacts on the aquifers in our region. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lorenz. Ms. Sergi, I have just a couple of questions that the delegation raised that I wonder if you could answer. One of them was about the dust and the air quality. And the other issue was about asking for peer-reviewed noise studies as opposed to internal reports. And I'm just wondering if you can comment on when peer-reviewed studies are done and why they're done, and about the air quality or the dust reports. Those were two specific things that the delegation raised.
Thank you, Chair Redmond. With respect to peer reviews, when we receive the background studies associated with an aggregate application or a zoning bylaw amendment for an aggregate application, in association with an aggregate application, we review the studies when they come in and to determine whether or not we have adequate in-house resources to review those, or if we need some specialized assistance in terms of, or expertise when reviewing these reports. And the peer reviews provide advice to staff with respect to addressing some of the issues that may arise through the review of the application. And so generally speaking, that's how we make the determination. So for example, the Hydro-G study was reviewed in-house by our water services staff. The noise study was actually reviewed by a peer reviewer. So with respect to the
dust,
the air quality and dust, sorry, yes. While I appreciate the concerns raised related to air quality and dust, there is very specific policies in the Township of Woolwich official plan that speak to the study requirements specifically related to air quality. Those same policies do not exist in the regional official plan as well as the Township of Wilmot plan. And so that's the primary distinction as to why one study was done for one application and a different study was done. The study that was done in association with the application referring to today, the Hallman pit application, was a dust best management practice, which fulfills, the requirement to deal with compatibility, both from a planning perspective and an Aggregate Resources Act perspective.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sergi. And I would just like to underscore some of the comments that have been made by our colleagues, and specifically Councillor Foxton. And I sit at the MOU table and I participate in AMO, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. And there is a lot of debate and there is a lot of concern for very much the reason that Councillor Rentz was talking about. We know that we are in a post-Walkerton world. And I would just hope that anybody listening would recognize that we have amazing staff that have great expertise, and it doesn't mean to say that we can always do. We don't always have the latitude. There are parameters through the Planning Act. There are parameters that are set forth by the province. And while we need to work within those, we work very hard at making sure that we are always coming down on the side of protecting groundwater. So thank you, Ms. Sergi. And again, thank you to the delegation for a very well presented presentation. The next delegations are about Councillor Strickland's motion around community benefits agreement. And the first delegation is Stephen Hamilton, Director of Public Affairs, and Karen Renkema, Vice President, Progressive Contractors Associations. Welcome. You registered today as a delegation and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. It's Stephen Hamilton from the Progressive Contractors Association. I don't think I can change my video, but oh, there it is. Okay. So thank you for having me here this evening to talk about the Community Benefits Agreements resolution from Councillor Strickland. My name is Stephen Hamilton. I'm the Director of Public Affairs at the Progressive Contractors Association. PCA member companies employ more than 25,000 skilled construction workers across Canada, represented primarily by progressive labor unions such as CLAC. PCA also has 37 member companies around Waterloo region that routinely bid or work on Region of Waterloo projects. PCA believes that Canada's construction industry allows for fair and open competition of companies reflecting various labor models in which no contractor is given artificial and unfair advantage over another on the basis of union affiliation. First, I want to commend Councillor Strickland for bringing this important issue to the council floor. The construction sector is clamoring for additional workers, as he knows, and certainly increasing participation in the industry, especially from traditionally underrepresented groups, is absolutely something that the construction sector strives to do. The motion tabled this evening would create a new binding contractual requirement for all regional construction projects over $1 million. This is a very significant proposal that dramatically changes how construction is tendered in the region. We propose that social procurement warrants additional study and consultation before we can support this resolution. Ultimately, it is premature to affix a dollar amount on contracts without proper consultation and study by regional staff. We therefore recommend that Council vote against this resolution and instead work with staff and stakeholders to undertake a broader consultative process. While Councillor Strickland's proposal seems routine and simple, the implications are largely unknown. The resolution is basically identifying a solution to a problem in which we have no idea the scale or the issues at hand. What are the current diversity challenges in construction in the region? Is it more acute with certain underrepresented groups than others? And if there are barriers to entering construction from those communities, is it because the employer isn't just hiring them, or are there other barriers that limit participation? Staff could be looking at this issue comprehensively across all procurement. What are the diversity issues in other tenders that the municipality issues? There may be an opportunity for a bigger conversation. Staff need to first study the issue at hand and develop an understanding of the state of labor practices in the region. Second, they should consider what other methods would be needed to achieve greater participation in the Waterloo context beyond CBAs and labor requirements. And third, there should be a cost-benefit analysis of CBAs directly on the region's budget. More broadly, on the region's access to contractors whom, for various reasons, may not be able to hire additional staff or lay off existing workers in order to meet new requirements. This resolution skips all those steps and purports to have a solution without even the most rudimentary background work completed. We need to understand how this resolution would impact Waterloo's labor and contractor pool. Companies that hire from union hiring halls would have an advantage meeting any quota conditions. In Ontario, CBA frameworks, while not overtly creating a building trades monopoly, could nevertheless produce similar results. Companies using non-building trades labor models are disadvantaged in a quota system. Union hiring halls are basically labor pools, and recruitment can be targeted to adding whatever workers are prescribed by the agreement. Non- or alternative union employers use direct hire to obtain employees. That is, when they need new workers, they go out and recruit them. A quota-based system, as suggested in this motion, could mean fewer opportunities for local contractors to bid on work and fewer opportunities for local workers if the workers are coming from the GTA. Lastly, Council has to understand the cost and administrative implications on the region if a CBA regime was created. Beyond the higher potential cost for construction, the region should consider the direct administrative costs of a CBA program. This initiative would and probably should create additional enforcement and oversight functions from the municipality as they audit and monitor all construction projects to ensure that contractors are meeting the diversity and apprenticeship quotas established by the resolution. There really is no template for this, considering not a single municipality in Ontario has a mandatory CBA requirement. I see my time's expired, so I'll just conclude by saying for those reasons, we believe the motion should not proceed in its current form. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. And I saw you kept glancing up at the clock, so thank you for sticking to your time. Colleagues, do we have any questions of Mr. Hamilton? Councillor Bravanovich, please go ahead.
Thanks. Thank you very much for coming in, Mr. Hamilton. You make a lot of excellent points. I guess my question is, are you aware that you're listed in the motion to be part of a working group on this issue?
Am I aware that I'm listed in a, I'm not aware of that, no.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions of the delegation? Thank you very much, Mr. Hamilton. We will be dealing with the notice of motion after we hear from all the delegations on this topic. The next delegate is Patrick McManus, Executive Director, Ontario Sewer and Watermain Construction Associations. Welcome, Mr. McManus. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Redmond and members of Regional Council. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you here this evening. I'm here to speak about this draft resolution on community benefit agreements. The resolution calls on the region to put in place a targeted hiring initiative as a contractual requirement on all construction tenders valued at more than $1 million. We appreciate the intent of this resolution and believe that there is an approach to workforce development agreements that employers in the construction industry can support, but we don't agree that this is the right approach. I've worked in the field as a road builder, and I have been working for the Road Builders Association and the Sewer and Watermain Contractors Association for more than 10 years now. And it's important to understand that there are very stark differences between the different construction sectors. It's the same type of distinction as those between police officers and firefighters. There may be some superficial similarities, but generally speaking, each construction sector is quite unique. They are treated differently in provincial regulations. They require different training and hiring practices and different types of contracts from the region. Project costs in our sector are material and equipment driven, and sewer and water main and road projects tend to be conducted with fewer workers than for similarly valued projects in the ICI or residential construction sectors. And these are the projects that make up the majority of contracts tendered by the region of Waterloo. By way of an example, there are a number of small locally owned contracting firms that are members of the Conestoga Heavy Contractors Association that employ less than 20 people. Firms like this may perform 2 to 4 municipal water main projects per year with a crew of 6 people per project. Each one of these projects would be well in excess of $1 million. If one of these firms happened to be successfully land 2 jobs here in the region in any given year, this resolution would require them to increase their labor force size by 15% per project at a minimum. Either that or let go one of their existing workers on a crew and have a CBA eligible worker replace them. Almost all of the workers that are in projects live here or in the regional area. The companies are headquartered here, taxes are paid, wages are spent, and a hard asset is built here for the money that you're already investing. These companies, especially the small ones, may not need more workers or even be able to handle additional workers on their payroll. So requiring a hiring initiative on every project is going to scare off some of these small contractors from working here. These are good contractors, they're local ones, many who have been working here for years or often decades. And what they do is niche. They build sewers, they build water mains, and only municipalities own these things. There is no other customer. And losing them from your bidders list is going to decrease competition and it's going to increase your prices. These things need to be considered and appropriately accounted for. I've been involved at the City of Toronto as they've been working to develop their own workforce development targets for a number of years now. And they originally targeted $5 million projects as their threshold, but after several years of failed starts, they've come to realize that $5 million is much too small of a project size. So now they're looking at $50 million as their threshold. And many in the contractor community would say that that's still too small, but at the very least, for projects like that, you're attracting larger firms that have the capacity to absorb these added labor costs and may actually need a churn of new people. These are considerations that have to be accounted for. It's very important to take a measured approach and to get this right. You need to understand the costs, the potential impacts on bidding, the impacts on local employers and on workers, and on the real needs and interests of people that actually want to work in construction. These are critical things to understand. And we strongly encourage the region to allow staff to work through these things. Allow them to map out CBA requirements, pilot them on projects of appropriate size and scope, and analyze the results to make certain that it's working as intended. You have an excellent chief purchasing officer here that, in our view, has been taking the right measured approach to this issue, and we implore you to let this approach continue. We're not opposed to CBAs on regional projects at all, because we need a new pipeline of workers into the skilled trades. It's important, but it's so critically important to get this right, to account for all of the different nuances of the different construction sectors, and to make sure that this program is sustainable. Thank you for the opportunity to make these remarks.
Thank you, Mr. McManus. I see a couple of questions. Councillor Jowett, please go ahead.
Thanks, Chair Redmond, and thank you to the delegation, and so finding some great points here. I did not represent a municipal sector when I had my own business in the search industry, but I always came from a best candidate at the time approach to fulfillment of such roles that I did look after. So when I try to understand what that might mean to business, and when we start to dictate other parameters rather than best candidate for the position, I start looking at fulfillment of that more from an upstream broad brush, like what kinds of things can we do to enhance the candidate pool that presents itself, the equality supply of labor that we're looking to achieve. And so in my opinion, things like Conestoga College and their skilled trades training, and I know that our economic development staff here, I'm not sure if Matthew Chandy's here, but I know he's done some great work with reskills and skills development in our post-COVID recovery initiatives to be able to draw some conclusions of skill enhancement for sort of pivoting labor into the places where we need them the most, inclusive of the ones who've been hit the hardest when it comes to the Indigenous communities and of course females. But what people have to critically remember is what the candidate pool has to offer us in the first place, because we're actually doing more harm than good when we create more parameters when we already have difficulty attracting certain populations to the candidate pool to select from in the first place. Can you help me understand what that looks like in the areas with which you're discussing?
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, we think the best investment that can be made here is in skills development and recruitment. And there are community groups and labor organizations and the region itself that can participate in this process. There are certainly jobs in the construction industry. There's a need for individuals, but trying to sort of shoehorn it onto every project just isn't the way to do it. A good investment is to broaden the pool by working with your local community groups and creating training and skills development opportunities for them, and then with skills training, there are going to be lots of opportunities in the construction industry to work. It's it's a growing industry. The region invests a tremendous amount of money every year in infrastructure, as do many of the surrounding municipalities. But it's that necessary step of the front end supports that a lot of these people need, and the skills development and training that they need in order to get the work. There are job opportunities, but saying on this project, that project, without even knowing the contractor that's going to land that project, it makes it really difficult. It makes it a really difficult prospect, to ensure that there's going to be an employment opportunity there.
And so if you can indulge me, Chair Redmond, just quickly to add to that. So for example, human resources is predominantly females. That's just the way it is. We had a hard time attracting males to human resources. It just the way the industry was for a long time. And so those are factors we have to recognize, right? In, even some of the myths around the work that we're trying to attract different sort of diversified members to a candidate pool. But if they're not there, we have to move upstream to attract them and to appropriate the skills that make them successful or employable, right? So I do appreciate that. Thank you so much, Patrick. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jowett. Councillor Bravanovich, please go ahead.
Thanks very much, and thanks for coming in, Mr. McManus. I was actually going to ask you the same question I asked Mr. Hamilton, but I realized it's actually the way that the agenda is printed, and the notion of creating a committee runs right as sort of from the motion to the names of people that And so I'm not going to ask you that. And for Mr. Hamilton's sake, I wanted to clarify, you're not being proposed as being part of the committee. It's just the way it was printed in our the latest version in our agenda.
Okay, that's great. I am certainly more than welcome to provide our feedback wherever that's possible.
I wouldn't want to leave you with the impression you're not invited to the committee. I think that's still to be determined. Councillor Galloway, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thanks, Mr. McManus, for coming out tonight. I think when I think of this particular CBA matter, it certainly has some merit, but what has more merit is if the industries themselves would be taking independent action to diversify their workforces, quite apart from any policies or requirements in regional tendering. So I'm just wondering, I'm curious whether or not, or to what extent, the organizations that you represent are actually undertaking, independent of the CBAs, initiatives to diversify through apprenticeship programs or hiring practices to get more representation of women or people from various racialized communities into these jobs. Are there things going on that the industry can speak about that they're doing independent of CBAs being contemplated in various municipalities?
Mr. McManus?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I can speak for the sewer and water main contractors across the province. We've invested in scholarship programs at 40 colleges and universities across the province. We do regional tours of these colleges and universities to promote the scholarship, promote careers in the sewer and water main construction trades. About 13 or 14 years ago, we started an organization called formerly called the Ontario Construction Careers. It's called the Ontario Construction Careers Alliance now, and it was formerly the OSWCA. And forgive me, I can't remember the acronym, what it stands for, but it went around to elementary school and high schools across the province to, again, promote to everyone careers in the heavy civil construction trades. We are a growing trade sector, and there is investment in water, wastewater, roads, bridges going on in every municipality across the province. We need more workers. We will hire any worker that is interested in working in our sector, any at all. I understand the historic bias that we have to get over in our industry, and I think that we've been making tremendous strides there over the past decade and a half. But it's difficult. It is, we're talking about outside construction work that is often deep down in, the middle of your streets, 4 or 6 meters down. It's muddy, it's dirty work, and it's difficult to attract anyone into our industry. And we are willing to take anyone and everyone that can get the appropriate skills training and is willing to work. It is, we've been trying for a long time to promote our trade. It's just it's often it's difficult to attract people in, but we are certainly willing to hire anybody.
Maybe just for clarification, so when you talk about scholarships and other kinds of programs, are they targeted to underrepresented groups, or are they just targeted generally to get more people into the trades or into the workforce for the kind of work that your organizations perform?
We cast the net as broadly as possible for those initiatives, just because of the demand for labor in our sector.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I see no more questioners. So again, Mr. McManus, thank you very much. And I would like to welcome Ian DeWaard, Ontario Director, Christian Labour Association of Canada. Welcome. You have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Chair Edmund and members of council. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. CLAC is a union that represents 60,000 workers nationally and more than 6,000 construction workers in Ontario, many of whom live and work within the region and these surrounding areas. We represent workers both in the compulsory trades like plumbers, electricians, and sheet metal workers, as well as non-compulsory trades such as carpenters, heavy equipment operators, and construction laborers. We believe a construction job is a ticket to a good life, creates valuable and transferable skills, an opportunity for pride of workmanship, and an income that allows agency and self-sufficiency. And we know that the undersupply of skilled labor in the construction sector, well documented, means that it is rife with opportunity for our youth and for groups of people presently underrepresented in the trades. To meet these needs and maximize opportunities, CLAC, often in partnership with local organizations, is helping to create pathways into construction jobs and to support construction learners, both prospective and current employees in their journey. CLAC's a proud partner with Lutherwood, with whom we've worked for years now on training job placement projects. Presently, we're sponsoring candidates identified by Lutherwood in an annual $65,000 multi-year commitment that provides both job access and pre-apprenticeship training. We're also proud supporters of the Ontario Youth Apprenticeship Program, OYAP, and just this year inked an MOU that will introduce OYAP into independent schools in Ontario that until now or recently were not eligible to offer this expedited pathway to an apprenticeship. Because we know that COVID has had a particularly hard impact on youth, women, and minorities, we're also proudly launching CLAC's Construction 101 program, designed specifically to create a 2-week bridging program targeted at workers hardest hit by the pandemic and who wish to train or transition into a career in the skilled trades. These partnerships are just a small sampling of the kind of coordinated effort that is occurring in the industry and in this region. So as a starting point, our union shares the sentiments that are encompassed in the preamble of Councillor Strickland's motion, and we encourage the region to join the effort to create construction career pathways for youth, for women, and groups proportionately underrepresented in the construction economy. However, we're here to recommend that instead of accepting the resolution as presented, Council first undertake to develop a robust and informed policy framework that is carefully considered by city procurement staff or regional procurement staff, and that allows community stakeholders an opportunity to help shape. We strongly suggest the region not start with arbitrary staffing quotas or construction project values, neither of these standards being derived from a particular model that has been proven in Canada. Using procurement for social good can be effective, but must be done with considerable care and flexibility. CLAC's an active participant in discussion about social procurement programs, and we've commissioned our own study on various models in Canada and abroad. From that, we've derived certain principles that should guide policy development. CBAs, or social procurement policies, should incentivize viable long-term employment, should support the creation of opportunities for both prospective workers in targeted groups, but also the small business owners that are representative of such groups. They should enable small and medium social enterprises to partner with the municipality, and not just large construction companies. They should take care not to create exclusive and privileged access to municipal projects. They should respect worker rights and respect of unionization. And they should carefully develop administration and enforcement requirements so as not to initiate new layers of expensive or unmanageable administration burden. We've also learned in our study that targeted social procurement policy requires clear and well-articulated policy objectives and a clear and acceptable agreement on desired outcomes. This point can't be understated, as research shows that to miss this important first step in the process can erode trust from the very community of stakeholders that the municipality counts on to achieve success. Done poorly, CBAs can impede the participation of local firms and local social enterprises. An ill-conceived CBA can in fact hinder the good work that's already being done in the community that advances the very aims this resolution aspires to. In closing, we suggest that the concept of community benefit agreements or other tools by which to derive social benefit from public construction procurement are still novel. And so we encourage council to be a leader in this space by first undertaking to better understand how to use and design procurement practices to achieve these aims. As one such stakeholder, CLAC looks forward to that continued dialogue. So with that, thank you for the chance to speak, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you very much. Just about a photo finish there, Mr. DeWaard. Councillor Jaworski, please go ahead.
Thank you very much through the chair, and certainly thank you to Stephen, Patrick, and now to Ian. It really seems that people find this conceptually as very interesting as I do, but you're saying there's a sort of a transition time frame. I found it very interesting what you said, Ian, about how CLAC is bringing on new students, youth, and that. But I missed the number of members you have and maybe how many people you're bringing along. And what I'm looking for there, Ian, is just to maybe to help illustrate to me how many like existing members you have who are going to work for 20, 30 more years in the industry, and how many people are coming into the industry. And we heard it, I think, from Patrick and maybe from Stephen as well. There's certainly a need and a desire from all people in the industry to get people into the trades. It's just a little bit difficult, as it has been for quite some time. If you could have some numbers to illustrate that, it'd be helpful for me, Ian.
So to your first question, I think you asked about CLAC's membership, and nationally that's 60,000. In construction in Ontario, that's about 6,000, about half, a little less than half of our total membership, because we are a multi-trade union, multi-sector union. But I think the more relevant statistic is probably the most touted one, which is the need for about 100,000 skilled trade workers in Ontario in the next 10 years to satisfy both growth and the net out of retiring workers. And so that's the pressing need that a lot of the industry is talking about. And as I mentioned, that's what creates just this huge wave of opportunity to create pathways to stable, solid, and good careers in the sector.
Absolutely. I think that's a key factor for people for jobs for life in these industries, that we're never getting away from sewers or roads or anything of these for quite some time. Maybe we'll add cycling lanes to it, though. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jaworski. Councillor Galloway, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ian, thanks for coming in. I was really intrigued by the number of initiatives or the scope of the initiatives that CLAC is undertaking in terms of trying to diversify the workforce. You know, things with Lutherwood sound like an excellent idea. I'm just wondering what fruits you have been harvested from that. Is it just a work in progress, or has it been particularly successful? Because it's those kinds of things that I'm particularly interested in. CBAs would be okay, but I'd rather these things happen more organically than having to be regulated.
I don't have historic data on the local partnerships in terms of numbers trained, but I can tell you that we provide, as I mentioned, access training. So to get onto a construction site, there's a certain amount of due diligence training that anyone needs. And so that's been some of the training that we've worked to offer to candidates that have been coming through that program. And we've also got now working to put candidates who might find difficulty finding support through other means, so let's say OSAP, through a pre-apprenticeship program that's offered from our location in off the 401 there in Cambridge, where we've got a partner that offers 12 to 16 week programs that introduce people to various trades and gets them ready, gets them work ready and hireable for the industry. So there's a two-part program to our commitment there. And I referenced some of the local initiatives, but didn't have time in 5 minutes to go on. What works really well for us is when we partner with organizations that are well suited to us, introduced, or who we can support, that are bringing along those that are the underrepresented. So, for example, my colleague works closely with the Aboriginal Apprenticeship Board of Ontario, which is an organization that helps equip and then support Indigenous people looking to get into the trades. We work with an organization called Trades Win, which is helping to set up new immigrants who come with other credentials from other jurisdictions and get them prepared and readied for work in construction in Ontario. We work with Skills Ontario, a fantastic organization, has had a big and historic presence in Waterloo, supporting that organization because its ability to reach into schools and excite people for life in the skilled trades. And so really it's through this varied and wide array of partnerships that we're We're looking to introduce and excite those that we think would find that long-term career potential through a job in those trades.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I see no further questions, so thank you very much, Mr. DeWaard, for coming in, and all the other delegations. It's been a very enlightening conversation. I'd also like to note, colleagues, that correspondence has been received from the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce on this issue, as well as the Ontario General Contractors Association and Grand Valley Construction Association, and they have been circulated to you electronically. I would now call on Councillor Strickland to introduce his motion. I believe you're moving it, and Councillor Clark is seconding it. Councillor Strickland?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd be pleased to move it and then speak to it.
Do you want to speak to it?
Yep, thanks. So thank you very much. You are all now on the road to becoming subject matter experts on construction and labor supply and sectoral differences. I appreciate the delegations coming in this evening and sharing their perspective. And I just like to make a couple comments with respect to some of the things you heard from the delegations. One of the comments was with respect to the different sectoral differences and how different sectors have different apprenticeship requirements. The motions to that, in terms of provincial apprenticeship requirements, right there in the motion. So that accommodates those sectoral differences the delegation referred to. I'd also like to say that, the comment about scaring off contractors, the evidence doesn't support that. In British Columbia, where they have community benefit agreements for all provincially procured construction projects, on road projects, they've actually seen an increase in competition and a decrease in prices. And this is a report that's just been recently published by the British Columbia Infrastructure Benefit Organization, which is a crown corporation of the BC government. And so I think we just have to weigh some of these perspectives in balance. I think the other thing that's important to recognize is, you heard from one of the delegations, is that we need to broaden the pool. We need to do more skill training. We need to get more people into the industry. Well, that's precisely what community benefit agreements or workforce development agreements do. They make it a requirement to have skilled labor, apprenticeship, training, and diversity of workforce as part of the construction project that's being delivered to the region. And I'd like to say also, speaking to the motion now itself, Madam Chair, is that we're not trailblazing here. University of Toronto has community benefit agreements requirements for all of their construction projects. Province of Nova Scotia has community benefit agreements for all projects over $250,000. The same apprenticeship numbers, 25% apprentices and 10% from disadvantaged groups, is contained in my resolution. The federal government in the budget on Tuesday announced significant funding for the development of community workforce development programs for municipalities and organizations that want to pursue procurement practices to encourage diversity of the supply chain in construction and other areas. City of Vancouver, a broad social procurement program which includes community benefits for construction. Similarly, the City of Toronto, City of Winnipeg just passed a resolution. Regina, there's a resolution coming from in Regina to council. British Columbia, I talked about. Infrastructure Ontario has community benefit requirements for large infrastructure projects. So we're not blazing a trail here. There's good, solid evidence that exists across the country around community benefits, and you're going to see more and more movement towards community benefits to leverage the procurement practices of government to deliver the greatest amount of good. And that's what this is really about in terms of the resolution. I get it. We got the attention of the industry, and I fully expected that. And that's one of the reasons why I published the resolution so early. I mean, the resolution, I shared the resolution with you over a week ago to allow for this input from the industry. And we heard from some members of the industry. not all members of the industry. There are other members of the industry who are in full support of community benefit agreements and workforce development agreements, which might be a better term. But I recognize change is hard. And, you know, for construction, like many other industries, it is hard. But the fact remains that for construction to change, and you heard from the delegations in Ontario, we need 100,000 more people within the next 10 years. You know, we need to find ways to diversify the people who are working for the region through contracts and through our own direct employment. So one way to do that is through social procurement, and one aspect of social procurement is through community benefits workforce development agreements for construction projects. And why focusing on construction projects? Because they're large. They're large projects, large dollar values with a large workforce, which can be adjusted to reflect greater diversity and provide more opportunities for youth in our community. And so I think it's important that we keep that in mind when we further deliberate this resolution. And I also have to say that, you know, I joked earlier about subject matter experts, and, you know, maybe in hindsight, when I looked at this resolution and included those prescriptive measures there, that might be a little bit premature in terms of the 25% and the 10%. But I wanted to get everyone's attention to what can be done. And this is being done, and it's being done successfully in those areas that I mentioned right across Canada. But I recognize that we need to have stakeholder engagement. We want to make this successful. We don't want to set it up as a failure. And so what I'm suggesting, Madam Chair, is with respect to the resolution, is that I would propose an amendment as indicated. And, you know, I would, you know, not a typo, but in terms of a language resolution. Some of these have been suggested by Councillor. We tried to come, I'm sure you're going to hear from Councillor Harris in a few minutes, and we tried to come to some kind of consensus on how we want to proceed forward on this. And we agreed on some things, but I think he's got some other points he would like to make where we disagree. But when it comes to paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, whereas the construction industry in general needs support, I would just change that where the construction industry strives to recruit, engage, and retain a diverse labor force. So change general needs support to strive. And where the 2 more paragraphs down, where many jurisdictions across Canada, the federal, provincial, and various levels of local government are mandating community benefits agreements, et cetera, and several other jurisdictions are considering community benefit agreements. So there's some that are working through the process, some that are already there. And then when it comes to the substantive part of my resolution, which I think is really important, but I recognize the challenges this might create for some of our industry stakeholders and some members of council. So the next paragraph is quite prescriptive in terms of 25% of apprenticeship hours to journey person hours be for indentured apprentices. I propose to delete that, and I would propose to delete the subsequent sentence about 10% of all apprenticeship hours to journey person hours be performed by underrepresented groups. So I am making, I think, a major concession here with respect to this resolution in the interest of having further dialogue and getting the policy right for the region of Waterloo. And the final paragraph, I would propose, with the support of the seconder, that it be amended to read that, therefore let it be resolved that the region of Waterloo support the development of community benefit agreements, workforce development agreements in principle, with specifics to be developed by an ad hoc steering committee supported by regional staff. So the intent of my motion is clear. This is a path we need to go down. My resolution speaks quite clearly about how this recession has negatively impacted women, Black, people of color, youth, and it is quite clear in what we're trying to achieve here in terms of delivering a greater social good through our construction procurement practices. But I will concede that we need to work out some more of these details. And I hope that council will support this, support the formation of a committee, and that committee would report back in September of 2021 with recommendations related to community benefits, workforce development agreements on construction. I'd also like to say this in conclusion, that this kind of public policy, which is happening in all kinds of jurisdictions across Canada, poses little risk to the region of Waterloo. The development of the policy proposes little risk to the region of Waterloo, but the benefits it can deliver for people who work for the region of Waterloo are large and substantive. And I encourage you to support the resolution and those amendments, subject to the support of my seconder, Madam Chair. I will leave it with that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Strickland. And I just really want to commend you with working with colleagues. And I personally am very supportive of the changes that you made, but I will look to the seconder, Councillor Clark, and if you'd like to speak to whether you find these friendly amendments and why you chose to second it, you have the floor.
Thanks, Chair. I do find them friendly, and I'm very happy to second it. I just would like to remind Council that we established equity and economic recovery, and particularly economic recovery for those disadvantaged or underrepresented groups that Councillor Strickland has mentioned in his resolution. We established that as priorities for Council this term and this year in particular. And I think that if we're serious about achieving those goals, we need to use all the tools at our disposal. Notwithstanding that we are perhaps not trailblazers here, I would nevertheless like to thank Councillor Strickland for his creativity in identifying a community benefits agreement as a tool to create more jobs and opportunities for groups and communities who've not only been historically disadvantaged, but they've been especially harmed by the COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. And again, thank you, Councillor Strickland, for the leadership in this. Councillor Jaworski, please go ahead. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, and through the chair. When I first saw this, I thought it was a great idea and very much followed the footsteps of KW Community Foundation, what they did probably about 10 years ago. I think I was on the board at the time with what's called impact investing, whereas they have a war chest of money that they invest and give off the interest, the payments to do good with that money in our community. And they decided to do more good by actually investing some of that money in impact investing right in our own community and making that available, as opposed to just putting it in the stock market or bond market or that. And I really feel that this sort of concept translates well to the regional level, doing more good with our investing in much needed infrastructure projects. So I thought that was very helpful for the future. I do think that Councillor Strickland's amendments help us all catch up on what we need to learn on how these agreements work. I was very pleased to read some of the material last night, but there was a lot of material to read. So I think we all need to catch up on that. And then the only suggestion or bug in an ear, not an amendment or anything like that, but if we could look towards a pilot project on this as soon as possible, and to pick that out. By that I mean after we hear back in September, that maybe staff could have an eye towards a substantial project that we think would really fit well based on what we heard from the speakers today, and had an opportunity to move that forward perhaps as early as early next year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jaworski. Councillor Verbanovich, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Redmond. I guess I have a question of staff. I'm wondering, I don't know if I'd be referring it to Mr. Dyer or who, but have staff had an opportunity to consider this motion? And is there any input from staff as to, a preference as to how we might proceed? This is a fairly substantive policy change. And there's much of what I've heard this evening that certainly I like. And I think it's moving in a direction that, we as a council and the community should strive to move towards. but I've also, heard some issues and concerns. And for example, we're talking about a $1 million number. We heard that City of Toronto tried 10 and moving to 50, and that there aren't other Ontario municipalities that have gone down this path. I'm just wondering if, normally something like this, we would see it have some staff consideration before we would deal with it. And so I'm just wondering if either Mr. Lochner or Mr. Dyer can comment on that.
So thank you for the question. And I see they've both lit up their little Hollywood squares. So I don't know, Mr. Lochner, do you want to go first and then Mr. Dyer?
Sure, I'll try. I think if it's the wish of council, we would benefit from time to research and digest the input, not only today, but the various points as well as the adjustment from the mover. We have not had time to dig into the various viewpoints to any great extent.
So I guess just on that, Mr. Lochner, because I do think, the coming out of the pandemic, we want to be nimble. We want to make sure we're moving in a timely manner so that we can support people with new opportunities as soon as possible. If you needed some time for staff to get a reaction back to us, would the next meeting cycle be reasonable, or do you need longer than that for at least the preliminary assessment, and that could lead us to the kind of in principle recommendation that Councillor Strickland's talking about in a working group thereafter?
Yeah, Mr. Dyer may want to weigh in. My initial thinking is it depends on what the final motion is. We certainly are familiar with these types of agreements, so it's not like we would be starting from scratch. I think the nuances are important, and the time length would depend on what's passed by council.
Mr. Dyer?
We have heard, for example, we've heard of, from the presentations and so far from the debate or discussion, some reference to policy change. That's different than obviously implementing. So I think if it, through you, Madam Chair, we'd prefer to hear the rest of the debate before commenting whether a month or two would be required.
Mr. Dyer, would you like to weigh in?
Through you, Madam Chair, just to say that if I understand the amendments solution properly, and I think I heard Councillor Strickland say with the specifics to be developed by an ad hoc steering committee supported by staff. I think that gives us a bit of I think that gives us time and some reassurance that there's going to be ample opportunity to I think for a number of us on staff to get up to speed on this particular issue, to research the various options and to outline for that ad hoc committee and ultimately for council the different policy and implementation options that are available, the pros and cons, the risks, the rewards. Whether we're able to do that by September, we're going to have to see how that works out. I would say that staff are in many areas 100% focused on vaccine distribution at this point, but we'll look to provide those resources for the steering committee. We'll put a timeline together and work with the ad hoc committee with respect to bringing recommendations back to council for final consideration.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, Mr. Dyer, what you're suggesting is the broad strokes that have been suggested provide the foundation upon which staff can go and investigate and bring recommendations back together with the council working group, but perhaps we wouldn't necessarily approve in principle, but would simply refer the issue to staff, the creation of the working group, and actually and that would then come back to us in a timeline yet to maybe be discussed based on input from others. Is that sort of what I'm hearing?
So through Madam Chair, I think I'll stay clear of whether you should refer it or approve it in principle. I think that's up to council to decide. I think either way, it strikes me that there's opportunity for research and consideration of options in either case. So I'll leave that with council to decide how to best proceed.
Okay, I will, Madam Chair, leave. I may come back and, subject to the further conversation, suggest a referral or an amendment. My comments later. At this point, I'll just end with my questions.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Erb. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a short question, if I may, to Councillor Strickland. Is the $1 million amount still in, or was that removed?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's why in my hand up, I wanted to clarify that $1 million is removed.
Okay, good. Okay. Yeah. To me, that seems like a pretty low threshold, so I'm grateful for that to be moved.
Yep.
I'm glad that the Councillor Strickland brought this to council. It's a whole new area for me to get to know and understand a little bit better. But as Councillor Clark indicated earlier, we have spent so much time in this last year on initiatives in supporting minority populations in our region, and I see this as another way that we can do that. So I'm appreciative of the amendments that he is proposing or things that he's taking out of the notice of motion, and would be happy that it be sent to an ad hoc committee for review and coming back to us at a later date.
Thank you, Councillor Erb. Councillor Harris, it feels like your fingerprints are all over this motion, so if you'd like to speak to it, please feel free.
Yes, and I thank you, Chair, and I beg the committees, or I guess council's consideration for some time here, and I appreciate the discussions I've had with Councillor Strickland on his motion, and thank him for bringing it forward. I think it allows for some good discussion and debate clearly, but also I think confirms the fact that we need more time to look at this. And so if you'll indulge me, I do want to get into the details, I think, which are important. As many of you know, I've spent a great deal of time on matters pertaining to municipal procurement, focusing on fair and open tendering, especially within the construction sector and for the region of Waterloo's procurement. I did send an email, some correspondence to council, in fact, last night, and I feel it's incumbent to share that in a public forum as well. And so I'll go ahead and do so at this time. Speaking to the specifics of Councillor Strickland's original motion, I do appreciate his consideration to I guess, modify it in some way. So there'll be items that I speak to that, of course, are off the table, but I think we'll only, hit the ad hoc committee should it be formed, and we'll have broader conversation there. So I stated to folks that the original CBA resolution from Councillor Strickland brings up the important issue of the need for further inclusivity in the construction sector. I agree that we need to do more, and this resolution seeks to move the topic forward. Unfortunately, though, the CBA resolution is incredibly early for our council to support. CBAs are a mechanism for ensuring diversity by inserting hiring quotas and targets in regional capital works contracts. However, in Ontario, and I know we heard this before, CBAs have been used only in a handful of instances, mainly on large multi-billion-dollar P3 projects, such as the Eglinton Crosstown rail project in Toronto. In these instances, the scale of the project makes CBAs workable since contractors have the capacity and need to hire new workers. And the length of the project in these cases allows for meaningful training to take place. The resolution previously as drafted would mandate CBAs for all construction projects over $1 million. For contracts with the threshold this low, CBAs would impact the contractor base who might be able to bid. Furthermore, an additional worker would need to be added to a 2 to 3 person crew on a temporary basis, significantly adding costs relative to the project, while also not benefiting workers who may only have a temporary part-time job. In fact, no municipality in Ontario has mandatory CBA programs for all construction procurement. Toronto has done most of the work on this, and as stated recently in the presentation, 2 months ago passed a resolution that they should strive to achieve a 10% equity target on construction projects over 50 million, because they understand the costs and limited positive impact on underrepresented communities when a project is not large enough or long enough to provide adequate training and employment. Much of the resolution makes statements that do not sync with obviously what the industry is saying, including the reference to the ratio of apprenticeship hours to journey person hours on construction projects. The majority of those employed on regional Waterloo projects are in the heavy civil construction sector: roads, bridges, sewer, water main, stormwater, infrastructure that you heard from Patrick McManus tonight, where formal apprenticeship hours do not exist, as these are trades that learn on the job with no formal apprenticeship mechanism. These tradespeople are recruited, trained, and hired and are significantly different in ways than those in the ICI construction sector. These are nuances that must be understood and accounted for in any region of Waterloo CBA program if we intend on really having a meaningful impact. We need to encourage contractors to hire more workers. We hear continuously the shortage of workers generally, and there should be more opportunities for diversity. What is needed is support from our and others community organizations to give them access to a list of workers wanting to get into the industry. Hiring quotas simply put that cart before the horse. We need to consider the cost implication, what additional resources would be required, how would the region enforce the targets after the tender is awarded and work begun. As mentioned, I'm not opposed to the use of social procurement. However, council needs more information before we agree to implement this with such low caps and such hard quotas, which clearly has been pulled out of the motion tonight, but it would be simply likely transferred to an ad hoc committee to implement, including stakeholder, contractor, worker engagement. I am, really encouraging council tonight to refer this to staff and have them put together a report that studies this topic further, including a review of what other municipalities in our province are doing so that we can create policies that best serve underrepresented communities and that respect construction procurement realities. As mentioned, our regional staff have already done some work on this area, and we really owe it to them to kind of hear them out in terms of where and what work has been done up until now. Additionally, the region should commit to studying social procurement across all of its procurement, generally including but not limited to construction procurement, which basically we've specifically laid out tonight. In order to support our broader community and small businesses, regardless of what industry they operate, we need to support underrepresented businesses in our community, not just one industry. And I would say to you that the devil is always in the details, and I would caution council on the wording of what we're using here. Although modified, we are supporting CBAs with this particular motion. That is very clear that we're doing so. And I want to, perhaps echo Councillor Verbenovic's comments that, staff should have an opportunity to come back. I mean, if surveyed the majority of council, I'm not sure if up until tonight, if council would actually, for the most part, know what an actual CBA is. And so, we have to know that there's proof on the benefits or impacts to the region. We've heard stakeholders plead with us and ask us to gather input from them before we move down that path. I would maybe, go as far as suggesting that, instead of changing to support in principle, we are committed to studying social procurement. I think that's maybe a very important distinguished, phrase, I guess, then from, support and principle. I really think it's incumbent, folks, and I know that several stakeholders didn't get time to come tonight, but they did send correspondence, and I'm going to take up a few more minutes of your time because I really think this is important. The Chamber of Commerce sent a letter today to us, or yesterday. Ian McLean in his letter references the challenges to recruitment of skilled professionals across the construction trades continue to be a priority issue, and local employers have strongly supported efforts to ensure inclusivity across our region. We would further request that council establish a preliminary working group to commence this process, particularly an analysis of the impact on local small and medium construction companies, and ensuring that no regulatory issues will restrict their ability to bid on and complete upcoming projects. I would say that the Ontario General Contractors Association, in partnership with the GBCA, an entity that represents 200 general contractors in Ontario, 700 members here in the region of Waterloo, or through the GBCA, openly wrote a letter to us as well, regarding the draft resolution. They go on to say the rationale for our outreach is to work collaboratively with the region of Waterloo in order to ensure that the proposed resolution language does not limit the number of bidders on any project or download the risk and responsibility to contractors in the construction arbitrarily. I really want to read a few points because I think it's so important to do so. They list out about 7 points. The first one, they talk about the draft resolution from the region or from Councillor Strickland forces construction to implement hiring, but is silent on where the workers are to be found. The resolution unilaterally downloads all the responsibility and risk of acquiring the mandated workers onto the construction contractors, but does not provide any infrastructure with respect to the regional approved sources for said workers. I know Councillor Galloway, brought up a good point when we are arbitrarily using a policy here to, interfere with, I believe, the free market. Without tabling any resources, the draft resolution also mandates fixed percentages and ratios being incorporated into contracts without a more fulsome discussion with the industry as to whether said targets are in fact even possible. The region would garner more support and cooperation from the construction industry if those targets were aspirational in nature and could be achieved through a provisional line item in tenders and contracts. Should the region want this endeavor to succeed, then we should consider a system that incentivizes the hiring of more diverse workforce and avoid a structure that penalizes companies for not being able to achieve objectives. With respect to objectives, the draft resolution only contemplates apprenticeship hours in conjunction with the work to be delivered. This speaks to only compulsory trades and does not contemplate voluntary trades that provides essential work delivered on projects. The region would be well served to make the resolution less constrictive to foster a broader adaptation of the proposed language. The proposed resolution would attach community benefits agreements, workforce development agreements to a contractual requirement for all construction tenders at $1 million. And I believe we've had a good chance to chat with that. The City of Toronto moved theirs to over 50. And finally, the smaller projects are typically performed by smaller contractors, and this resolution would place a disproportional emphasis on community benefits that may inhibit some smaller contractors from bidding should it be a condition of the tender. This would adversely affect smaller construction contractors, and the OGCA and GVACA believe that this is not the intent of said proposal. So they asked about the fact that they would like to understand why this resolution have opted to segregate only construction projects as having to be subject to this resolution and not other sectors. Our associations would like to understand why other sectors that deal with the region are not constrained by this specific procurement resolution. I guess I can go on and on about this, but I would say to you that this is a significant procurement policy that we will place on, to all construction tenders by supporting this resolution tonight as it's worded. Again, I want to get into the weeds here. The changing to support in principle is an acceptance of CBAs when, frankly, I believe we don't have the information as to what a CBA is, the goals, the broader impacts to the community, to the business community. We've got no benefit risk, cost benefit analysis, very minimal stakeholder input. Again, I would be amenable to having the mover and seconder consider changing, to support in principle to the region is committed to studying social procurement. That would satisfy me. However, if not in that case, I would hope that our council could at least refer this to staff. I know they've been working on it. They've been distracted, obviously, with the COVID rollout. But again, I think it's important that we get a fulsome staff report ahead of any support for a major policy that will have significant ramifications to procurement here in the region of Waterloo. We just got out of closed tendering after 8 years of being locked into, a closed tender relationship that we had really no part in initially. And I caution council on moving so quickly, in this without proper staff, research and broader consultation. So, I guess I've got two things on the go here. One, would the mover and seconder be amenable to, changing to support in principle to the region is committed to studying social procurement? And if not, then I would ask for a referral to staff to come back with, a broader report, introducing council to what CBAs are and all that nature, like they would do in a normal case. I believe we owe it to them to at least do that. So I'll perhaps leave my name in the queue in case there's things that come back up, because this is an important topic, not only to our business community, but to the taxpayers that foot the bill for infrastructure. And so I'll leave it at that. I really appreciate council's patience with me on this one. But as you can see, this is a matter of high importance to me.
So, Councillor Harris, I really appreciate your input. I don't know if you can sort of put your thumb in as a bookmark in this process. So I'm going to say that what I'm hearing you suggest is that you would like a friendly amendment, which is to change the support in principle. Should Councillor Strickland and Councillor Clark accept that as a friendly amendment? And if not, you would put that forward as an amendment?
Yeah, I think that, again, changing support in principle to the region is committed to studying social procurement. I mean, I think what I'm hearing is that's what they want to do. But I really believe that, by saying we support it in principle is a definitive, yes to CBAs. And we're just going to now hammer out the logistics of how it's going to work, rather than let's come back with a proper staff report on, CBAs to begin with, and then move forward.
So I'm going to ask the mover and the seconder if they see this as friendly, and if they don't, then I'm going to ask if you have a seconder for an amendment. Councillor Strickland.
Well, Madam Chair, I don't see it as friendly. It's in contravention of the purpose of the resolution, and the resolution is to support the concept, but form a committee to work out the details, not to refer to staff to go into a lengthy study and do more further research. I mean, that's just delaying the whole concept. And the reason this is put forward, and we didn't even talk about in terms of the numbers in the resolution, in terms of, the high unemployment that the pandemic has brought to racialized Canadians, 20.1% for Southeast Asians, 16% for Black Canadians, 16% for Latin Americans. I mean, I'm not quite sure what Councillor Harris is afraid of. And most of the delegations said they support this in principle. And I removed most of the contentious items from the resolution, but Councillor Harris still didn't seem that is good enough and went on to critique them. So I'm really not sure what the big issue is here, to form a committee of council to review it and report back and find ways in which we can create more opportunities for women and racialized Canadians to be disproportionately affected by the pandemic in our community. I think it's good public policy, and I've been flexible in changing the resolution to accommodate further discussion and further review. And I think we should get on with it. If we go to a big study and delay it any further, who knows when it will come back, Madam Chair. So I don't see that proposed amendment as a friendly at all.
Thank you very much, Councillor Strickland. So I'm going to go back to Councillor Harris and ask if you want to propose your amendment and see if you have a seconder, and then we'll discuss that proposed amendment.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just want to go back and I read out an email that I sent to my colleagues in a public forum, because I believed that, that needed to happen, that I shared that with the public. And although the motion was changed, I wanted to get out the facts that had an impact to the original motion. And I appreciate the changes to that. However, that's where we're headed if we approve this tonight. And I think the answer of not accepting the friendly amendment here shows full well that this tonight, what you're doing is supporting CBAs in principle, and that we're just now going to move on to how they're going to be rolled out, where I strongly believe we do not have the consultation here and the impact within our region to be able to do that tonight. And so I think by not accepting my friendly resolution to the region is committed to studying social procurement, I think we fleshed out the fact that you are committing to do this by supporting the resolution as is. And so, if I don't have a seconder to that, which I think is the middle ground, then I have to ask for a referral to staff. And I don't know if I. So do I do that first piece, Chair Redmond, and then move on if there's no seconder to that?
See if there's a seconder for your motion. And your motion basically reads the same way as Councillor Strickland's, except it would be to consider rather support than support in principle, correct?
Yeah, the region is committed to studying social procurement.
Is there somebody that would second that motion? Okay, sure. Councillor Jowett is seconding it. I have other speakers. Councillor Bravanovich.
So before I potentially move a motion of referral at the appropriate time, can I just understand from Councillor Harris why he wants the wording to be social procurement as opposed to simply referring that the region of the concept that the region of Waterloo attach community benefits agreements, workforce development agreements as a contractual requirement to this staff and council working group. Is there more to the overall concept of social procurement that needs to be studied as part of this, other than community benefit agreements?
I think it's I'm using social procurement as another term for community benefit agreements. They're one and the same, but I definitely think that tonight we're targeting perhaps one industry and not looking at it as a fulsome manner. It's just I'm used to using social procurement. The more technical term perhaps is a community benefit agreement, but that's a definitive, prescriptive thing that takes place. So it's just a wordsmithing.
Okay, I mean, listen, if it ends up being a bit of a midpoint, I certainly
social procurement is a broader concept, I guess. So that would include a community benefit agreement, right? There could be other things to social procurement than just a benefit agreement.
Okay, so let me be absolutely clear on this issue. I firmly believe that there is significant work that needs to be done in the construction sector and in many other sectors across this region and across this country to ensure that underrepresented groups, including Indigenous people, women, Black Canadians, people of color, veterans, and youth, are well represented and have equal opportunity across various sectors of our community and our country, including, quite frankly, in our own organization, the region of Waterloo, as well as in the one that I'm here representing as well, the city of Kitchener. And that is partially what both of our councils have embarked on and committed to do work on going forward. I, in principle, very much support what Councillor Strickland is talking about seeing what role we can play to help facilitate that. But I would, stand here and challenge the vast majority of us, except maybe Councillors Strickland and Harris, that we don't fully understand what community benefit agreements and workforce development agreements are, and what the implications of those agreements may be on us as an organization. And for me to say that I agree with something in principle means, in fact, that I do fully understand that, and all I need to do is figure out how to operationalize that. And so I'm not prepared to support this in its present form. Whether or not we send it back to go and study, or whether we refer it, that's what needs to happen. I have said I think it needs to come back in a timely way. I understand what Councillor Strickland is saying here. This cannot become a 2-year study project. This needs to be part of our economic renewal and something that we want to look at. But we need to do our homework, folks. And so I would really urge us to to not approve it in principle today, but to refer it for further study as is being suggested. And maybe the wording needs a little bit of tweaking, but I think that's where we need to go.
So, Councillor Ravanovich, just to be clear, you're speaking in favor of Councillor Harris's motion, which is to consider.
I want to be really clear. I think it's important that we're clear on the wording here. And so it'd be great if, the clerk can put something actually on the screen so we all know what we're voting on.
I don't know if we have, I was actually going to ask Councillor Strickland when we get to that point, because he has made several changes. I don't know if I captured all of them. I have 2 more speakers. So Councillor Lorentz and then Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I haven't spoken on this issue yet. I really don't know what a CBA was either. So I think if we're going to do this, we need to do it once and do it right. So I have a tendency to agree with Councillor Ravanovich that, and I don't think it should take a long time, but we need to send this back to staff and have some our staff look at it and see what the impacts would be, what the benefits would be, and who else is doing this kind of stuff, and come back in a timely fashion within a month or 3 weeks, the next cycle, and at least give us some indication of not only the impact on the private sector industry, but how it would impact the public sector industry. I agree that this is a great idea, and I think it should be worked in with all the other strategies that we've talked about for economic recovery over COVID. But I think we need to just slow down a little bit so we all have a better idea. And I don't know who else would admit it. I don't see anybody shaking their heads that they agree, but I think it's something that we really need to have a better understanding of. And I know that we want to move quickly on some of these initiatives, but I'm just a little nervous about it. And I think it's better to try to bring everybody along than to start off confrontational with the construction industry or whoever is out there. So that would be my suggestion. I think we just need to slow down a little bit and have a report from our staff so we know exactly where we want to go with this thing.
Okay, I'm going to acknowledge Councillor Clark, Strickland, and Harris. And go ahead, Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of comments. Support in principle does not mean any sort of commitment. To support something in principle means we support it based on what we know so far. That's the definition of support in principle. We are not experts on construction, with the possible exception of the few people that were mentioned, but we're not experts on public health, but we make decisions to move forward on public health matters. We're not experts, certainly I'm not, on finances or how we're going to handle our debt, but we make decisions as a councillor based on what we know, which is a strategic kind of decision, not an operational decision. Inherent in Councillor Strickland's motion is doing that work that we're all talking about needing to do. It's doing that consulting, it's having those groups present to fill in those blanks between what we know now and what we will need to know before we move forward. But I'm completely comfortable with support in principle. I don't feel that a deferral is necessary. I feel the motion gives us the time that we need and the mechanism that we need to get to where people want to be. So I'm not in support of the amended motion.
Thank you. Everybody switched around. Councillor Jaworski, were you next? No. Councillor Harris.
Okay, yeah, no, and thank you for the comment, Councillor Clark. We're not experts, but this is the first opportunity this council has had to discuss CBAs or social procurement. I mean, I look at social procurement as a broader umbrella when it comes to, CBAs. It's just one component dealing with perhaps with one industry. But, typically when we make decisions as a council, we have, staff input, we have research, we have stakeholder input, here done by regional staff in order for us to make good decisions on behalf of taxpayers and stakeholders. And we don't have that here. We have a resolution that the majority of council has really just seen in the last few days, have delved into it for the first time, a discussion on it in one night. And so, you know, we need to have staff look at this. And I mean, I don't know if you know, Commissioner Dyer, you want to chime in perhaps some more on that now after we've had this discussion on what a referral to staff would look like, and now accepting that you know, the mover and the seconder do not accept friendly amendment. I guess we're at a point where, you know, I'd move you know, referral to staff, and I don't know if staff can comment perhaps on that now that we've had more discussion and debate on the matter.
So, Councillor Harris, I would tell you that this is a political decision. It's probably unfair to put staff there. So if there is a seconder for a referral, that will take a precedence over both the amendment and the main motion. Is anyone willing to second the motion to refer? Okay, Councillor Brvanovic. So now we can talk about time and place. And I don't know, Mr. Dyer, if you'd like to jump in at this juncture to say what you think a reasonable reporting back time might be, or if you'd like to take it away and consider it.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And if I may choose door number 2, I think that would be preferable. Give us an opportunity to have some discussion, not only with procurement staff, but with our legal folks and our staff in design and construction and facilities. And we can get some perspectives and, you know, look to bring, you know, a brief report back for committee's consideration as soon as possible. But a bit of time to consult with some of the staff would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Dyer. Councillor Jaworski, go ahead.
Thank you. I think my comments apply to all aspects of what we're discussing here. Number one, I think there's very little difference between what's on the table. Councillor Strickland's is the most efficient because it allows us to run things in parallel as opposed to in series, where we have to wait for a future council meeting for us to come to the decision that we actually want to invest our money more wisely. And then number two, you know, we have excellent staff. They will do an excellent job, and they will, you know, although we've heard that it might be a short report, it's still going to take a lot of staff time during a pandemic to come back with a report. And all we're really going to change that is, okay, now we agree in principle, and now we can get on with it. So I just see this causes a lot of staff time, valuable staff time being used at a time when there really isn't any to go around to prepare reports so that we become, you know, much more informed on something that when we could do it in parallel with Councillor Strickland's motion. And moreover, Councillor Strickland has taken over a lot of the mandatory parameters in there. So those parameters are now in the hands of the committee or the subcommittee or whatever we call it. And they can do as they see fit. They may come back with what we heard earlier, might be $50 million in up construction projects. I don't know, but it goes into the committee's hands, and it's a very efficient way of us moving forward today.
Thank you. So I would just caution everyone that we're now speaking on the motion to refer, correct? Councillor Shantz, please go ahead.
Thank you. Just a question of clarification on the motion. The difference between referral and deferral is just that we're asking staff to come back with a report as opposed to just going it to a later date.
I would ask that the clerk can clarify that. Tim?
Thank you, Chair Redmond. Yes, so to refer to staff is to give staff direction to bring the report back, as opposed to deferring it would be to delay it to a future council meeting without a staff report.
Okay, thank you. I'm just, I'm inclined to agree, I think, with, I'm listening intently to this because it's not my area of expertise, but I think I agree with the referral to staff to just get a little more background and information. But I'll continue to listen to the debate.
Thank you. Mr. Dyer, did you unmute because you wanted to speak, or are you?
No, my apologies, Madam Chair.
No problem. Councillor Galloway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that Councillor Jaworski stated my position quite well. I think the difference between a proven principle and commit to studying is really the only difference is that it's just going to take longer to get from A to B, because there are decision points still along the route. There'll be one more decision point, theoretically at least, if we accept the referral as opposed to accepting in principle. It doesn't mean that we're going to implement it. Doesn't mean that we're going to do it. It just means that we're going to get to that decision point more efficiently and more quickly. And I do think that time is an issue in this particular matter, as opposed to many other matters that may not have quite the urgency that we might consider from time to time. So I don't think I can support the referral.
Thank you. Councillor Strickland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really appreciate the conversation, and I understand people are trying to get this right, but let's just get on with it. Let's form the ad hoc committee. The committee's not going to come back with any kind of wild-eyed recommendations that are going to jeopardize our tendering process. Let's just get on to it and get on with it and find a way, working with the committee, with committed councillors and staff, and how we can put into place effective public policy. Let's move it forward, and then once the committee comes back with the great support of staff, we'll have something that we can look at a little bit more further. So I really appreciate the comments from all of my colleagues, and particularly those who feel that there is little risk in supporting this in principle. If we don't support it in principle, all we're doing is really delaying the process.
Thank you, Councillor Strickland. Councillor Bravanovich.
Thanks, Chair Redmond, for your indulgence. And I think there seems to be some lack of clarity on what Councillor Harris's referral motion is. In my understanding, and what I thought I seconded, to be clear, was that we're referring the idea back to staff and the working group, and to bring a report back. And the only thing that should be arguable is timing. And I think the original timing was September. So that's what we're referring. So instead of simply making a commitment around approval in principle, we're doing essentially the same thing, but referring it instead, and having all the same work be done and come back by September with a recommendation.
I thought the amendment was to refer for further study, Councillor Van.
Yes, I guess I would look to Councillor Harris. I had a slightly different interpretation of what Councillor Harris was suggesting. So Councillor Harris, can you clarify for the rest of us, as well as the seconder of your motion, to refer exactly what the intent and time frame was?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't put a time frame on it. I just feel that, there'll be staff engagement on this, whether we go into an ad hoc committee of council that supports, CBAs, or we're going to wait for staff to get back to council on more information about CBAs. And so I'm open to, the seconder's conditions on that. I just am adamant that we give staff an opportunity to come back and provide the professional input that we expect of them, that we know we would get on such an important matter that has legal implications, cost implications, and all sorts of things. And to look at, again, social procurement and not just one item, as I had stated, and I looked up again in terms of, I said here that, community benefits often equal quotas, and social procurement is a more broader term. And I just think there's an opportunity, if our goal is to support, these communities, let's look at it in a more holistic approach. I know, and we know, that the regional staff have already worked on this. There's already been work done. Let's hear from staff in terms of what that is, and bring it forward to council. So if there's the seconder, Councillor Verbanovic, has broader conditions on that, I'm open and willing.
So if I could boil it down to the simplest terms, you're basically looking at this as a two-step process, Councillor Harris. One is that this referred to staff, staff brings it back, and then we would look at the substantive piece, pending on what that information came to council on the substantive parts of Councillor Strickland's motion?
I suppose, yes.
Okay, Councillor Verbanovic, is that what you thought you seconded? Do you still want to second it?
No, so to be clear, and I mean, I thought Councillor Harris initially was going down what I thought I seconded, and what I'm prepared to second is that this whole idea be referred to staff in the working group with a timing to bring a report back by September. That's what I'm prepared to second, if that's what Councillor Harris is moving.
Yeah, I'm fine with that, yep.
Okay. Do we all have a joint understanding then? So we're basically talking about Councillor Jaworski.
I don't see a difference.
Sandy doesn't see a difference.
That's what I was going to say too. The only difference is we've taken out the CBA wording and changed it to social.
No, and what we've taken out is the in principle, support in principle. That's the fundamental issue. Is so we're sending it as an idea, as a concept to the staff working group, to staff and the working group, and to bring a recommendation back by September, which is the exact same thing that Councillor Strickland would like to see happen without us, but it does not have us committing to support in principle today.
So it's not presupposing an outcome.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So I would just have to say that I will take some responsibility. Perhaps this is not my finest moment as a chair, but that I would tell you that I think that was the amendment that Councillor Harris wanted to make that wasn't seen as friendly by the mover and the seconder. And it's somewhat different than what I was hearing for a referral. So I am going to all agree with your indulgence that the motion to refer is no longer on the table. And we are now going to be voting on an amendment that takes out the words in principle. And if the motion is passed, it is the formation of an ad hoc committee, which will be informed by staff. And I would look to Councillor Strickland. Is everybody satisfied? I think it was the fourth paragraph, whereas the construction industry strives to support, strives to help recruit, engage, and retain diverse labor force. 2 paragraphs later, Councillor Strickland took out the 25% as well as the 10%, which was specific. He also struck the $1 million. And it was the region of Waterloo will support community benefit agreements.
So point of order, I'm not trying to be difficult, Madam Chair, because I know how difficult these motions can be, but at the end of the day, all that matters is not the whereas sections, but all that matters ultimately is the operational sections at the end. That's the actual motion that council is voting on. The rest is just background information.
Well, I would tell you that I do think that they're germane because it mentioned thresholds, but I don't think we need to belabor this anymore. Councillor Strickland, I will give the last word for you before we're voting on the amendment.
Thank you so much, and thanks everyone for your indulgence. It is an important matter, and look, in the interest of collegiality and moving this forward, the amendment that we have now, I can support. The amendment that I was arguing against earlier was about sending it back for further study, and that's what I thought, and many of my colleagues are nodding their heads, thought was on the floor. So at the end of the day, we're simply removing supporting in principle, which I think by referring to staff to support an ad hoc committee, you could argue, well, we are supporting it in principle one way or another. But anyways, we're supporting having a further look at this. And so I can support that amendment, Madam Chair, as long as I understand it correctly, that we're referring to staff, we're referring to the ad hoc committee, we're creating an ad hoc committee, referring the matter to the ad hoc committee with the support of staff. So I see Councillor Banovic and Councillor Harris nodding, and that's what we're voting on.
Okay, and where is Councillor Clark? You're nodding as well? Okay, so we're just going to grab victory out of the jaws of defeat here. And I think we're all on the same page. So everybody who is in support of the amended motion, which basically will cause the creation of an ad hoc committee supported by staff and reporting back by September 2021, please use your icons and vote. That is unanimously supported. And you know what? It was a good process. It was somewhat convoluted. And Councillor Strickland, I really commend you for bringing this forward. And I also want to absolutely give a heartfelt apology to Samantha Estoesta. And Samantha, you are another delegation. And had I seen your name, you appeared in a screen, and I thought, I would have taken you before we had this long debate. So Samantha, I hope you're still with us. You have 5 minutes.
Yes, I'm still here.
And I bet you found it fascinating. So thank you for hanging in. You want to talk about the prioritization of vaccine for childcare workers. And I believe you have 5 minutes, but you can take a few more if you want.
I must say that one of the reasons why I married my partner is our love of watching council meetings like this. So this is a particular delight to not have childcare duty tonight and be able to partake in something that I regularly used to enjoy. So the second thing is, as I start my delegation, is that as you all are aware, that when I applied to be a delegate at today's meeting last week, we were in a completely different environment. So I would like to begin by thanking public health by doing the right thing and opening up vaccination registration to Group 1 of the essential workers who cannot work from home, inclusive of educators and childcare workers. This is fantastic news. I, like many, cried tears of joy when I heard the news yesterday. And it was the first thing I talked with my daycare provider when I dropped off my child this morning. I also wanted to take time to thank the Emmanuel at Brighton staff who took an unpaid day to strike, highlighting why it's so incredibly important that we make childcare and schools safe. Vaccination is just one way to do this, as is advocating for $24 an hour base pay for childcare workers, something that the region should tie into their new funding model for childcare services in Waterloo region, which I believe a report will be coming back based on the survey in June, which is also something I'll be looking forward to. Paid sick days is another. That was in our letter, which I believe is now up to 45 signees compared to the 16 when it was first submitted. I'm also cautiously optimistic that the provincial government will be announcing this in the coming days. And I also wanted to thank Council for sending a letter in January in support of paid sick days. This provincial government gets hundreds of letters a day asking them to do the right thing. And we can't expect the old playbook of sending one letter or having a one-off meeting to work anymore. We are asking Council to be constantly advocating to our provincial government to do the right thing. Weekly letters, forcing it on agendas with staff or elected officials, having regional staffers move back to provincial staffers on a regular basis. We need to be using every tool in the toolbox. And this very well may be being done right now. And if it is, thank you for your advocacy. And please use every channel available to transparently show this to the region of Waterloo's residents. Just like all of you, we're all on fumes and would rather be knocked down with information instead of being searching for it when we're also juggling whatever the pandemic lets us take on in the moment. COVID-19 is a watershed moment. The disparity between our communities in Waterloo region is exponentially growing. Communities are mobilizing now, though. Apathy is turning into advocacy. The disenfranchised are becoming grassroots leaders. And this is a fantastic thing to watch as someone who's been an activist for what feels like much longer than I want to say, as I've now crossed over the 30 age. The other thing too is that the slowness that has plagued how politics and governments operate pre-COVID-19 is no longer met with apathy from its citizens. What was once excused as, oh, well, that's how politics works, is now met with demands for concrete and timely action. Black, Indigenous, and racialized residents are currently emotionally spent from the Derek Chauvin trial, the deaths of Micaiah Bryant and Andrew Brown now, the 2 anti-Asian targeted mass shootings, along with the pride of seeing the Haudenosaunee chiefs declaring development moratoriums on the entire Haldimand tract. And as we speak, there's a white nationalist march being planned in Wilmot Township that is organized by a centrally managed white nationalist group who uses military tactics to terrorize Black, Indigenous, and racialized people. I've spent the better part of today working on community responses and safety measures due to this march. I think I speak for many of us that we can't claim to be a progressive region if all we do is wait for this government to lead. They're not going to. And we can't claim to be a welcoming region if white nationalists are targeting our communities for rallies. And we can't claim to be a hub for innovation if half of our population can't work because they can't find affordable or accessible childcare in the region. And we can't claim to be an anti-racist region if we prioritize funding police budgets over social services. Tonight, I was so happy that I got to be a part of this, that tonight you voted in favor of Councillor Strickland's motion, albeit greatly amended, to create an ad hoc committee on with the support of staff to report back in September on community benefit agreements. This could be a great step forward and would show us how to use the tools of council to push for a more representative and equitable construction. This is fantastic. The prioritization of childcare workers and educators is also a fantastic step forward. Your community is relieved and grateful for this action, and we're asking you to take another step forward. We're looking you to push this government to listen to us, and we're looking to you to continue to act. Look at Peel in Toronto and how they're using Section 22 orders, or how Mayor Cam Guthrie in Guelph's leadership on pushing against the government has been highlighted in the last few days, or how Mayor Brown's pushback on the closures of playgrounds, or the province-wide pushback on the expanded police measures, which, to my knowledge, has still not been officially amended. We're essentially trying to raise a barn, and we're asking you to join. Tonight was a fantastic use of the tools of council, and I hope that we can continue to see the tools of council to be used to highlight the voices of our citizens here. Thank you.
Samantha, I'm so glad that you weren't bored to death. It was rather a lively discussion, and I know of all the people in the community, you'd be one that would be engaged. So thank you for being so good-natured. Councillor Bravanovich.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Redmond and Samantha. I just want to thank you for, number one, waiting it out. Number two, to assure you that the other side of 30 is even better than the younger side of 30. You just start counting at 29A and B and C and so on. And number three, for your passionate advocacy on many of these issues, including the sick leave. That is one that. I know, in addition to the region, we've passed a motion twice in Kitchener. Waterloo passed one last night. We've been advocating. I know Chair Redmond has at AMO. We have at FCM. We've been advocating with our government MPs and MPPs, and we'll continue to do that. So thank you for speaking out on that.
Councillor Galloway, did you want a question, or are you still voting on the last issue?
No, that was my vote, Madam Chair, on the last issue. Sorry.
So I see no other questioners. I guess, Samantha, the only thing I would add to what Councillor Vrbanovich said is, yes, we continue to advocate. We don't send one letter. We send letters. We phone ministers. My staff talks to their staff. It's a full court press. And so we very much take to heart what our community needs, and very much do appreciate the activism by people like you to keep drawing attention to it. So thank you very much. I'm glad you enjoyed the debate.
If I may, Chair, it would be wonderful to see maybe on a monthly basis, some sort of graphic or highlight of the type of advocacy that's happening, because I think that would ease a lot of the fears in the community to see how in depth that pushback is. Just because not everyone spends their free time watching council meetings like me, and it might be something to then be able to highlight the work that's going on that they might not be aware of.
We'll certainly take that under advisement. Thank you, Samantha. I see no further questions, so we're going to move on to, we'll now have a motion to approve the minutes from the previous meetings as listed. This is moved by Councillor Erb and seconded by Councillor Foxton, and it is A through M. And you're already voting. Yay. That is carried. Councillor Jowett, did you want to make an intervention?
If you don't mind, Chair Redmond, I'm sure you're probably sick to death of my, I can't even say it anymore, of my recusal, but I would like to make sure that it is once again acknowledged in the list of the minutes that pertain to the discussion around the land employment, the provincially significant employment land conversion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jowett. Communications package was distributed electronically, and I would just like to highlight the City of Cambridge. Item B was the appointment of Deputy Mayor and Alternative at Regional Councillor, Councillor Mann. I think Councillor Mann has been able to rejoin us, so welcome again. Good to see you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
They're also under communications, and I think this was drawn to your attention, colleagues, Waterloo Regional District School Board advocacy for stop arm cameras on school buses. That arrived on the 19th of April. Councillor Jaworski, go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair, perhaps to our CAO, that is something that local mayors have been hearing about. Other regional councils have been hearing about for quite some time. It's good to see the note from the school board. This whole stop arm camera thing is just it's a snake pit of every level of government, judicial, third party, student transportation services. This is something that we somehow need to get a handle on, and perhaps through our CAO, Bruce Lochner, and maybe with the other area CEOs, that we can figure out a path forward on this. It's something that's taken up a lot of mind share for me, and I see it as a foggy way forward, but I think this is something that everybody seems to want. It just seems complex.
Mr. Lochner?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that away if that's the wish of council. We can certainly discuss both internally as well as at the CAO meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. Our council voted to have me send a letter of advocacy in support of the Waterloo Region District School Board on this. We had some discussion about, we're talking about the school arm, the school bus arm, right? Yeah, okay. Right. We had some discussion about pros and cons and how effective it was, but in the end, we voted to send a letter of support for the school board.
Thank you for that update. Councillor Harris.
Yes, just quickly, when I was a provincial member, I supported a colleague that had the stop arm bus matter, and I know we dealt with that back in 2016, 17. It's a long time coming. I really hope that regional council, and I know with provincial offenses, they're involved in collections and City of Toronto and all kinds of things. I really hope that we can get this matter moving forward for the betterment of kids and safety. I mean, the amount of blow-bys on buses that happen in our region every day, if you were to look at the stats, is dramatically troubling. I've witnessed it myself. Bus drivers see it all the time. It's scary stuff. It needs to be stopped, and I hope that we can put the proper resources into support it takes to get this done. Thank you.
So is it the wish of council that I write a letter in support of this advocacy? I'm seeing nodding heads. So that's moved by Councillor Harris, seconded by Councillor Nowak. All those in favor? Super. Thank you. I'll now entertain a motion to go into the Committee of the Whole to consider reports. This is moved by Councillor Galloway and seconded by Councillor Jaworski. That is carried. Colleagues, first up are the finance reports. These are moved by Councillor Jowett and seconded by Councillor Kiefer, and these are items A through M. I see no questions or comments, so if you could use your icons to vote, that would be great. Thank you. Colleagues, the next is the library report from the Library Committee. This is moved by Councillor Armstrong and seconded by Councillor Shantz, that the Regional Municipality of Waterloo allocate the 2020 Region of Waterloo Library operating surplus in the amount of $490,011 to the Library Capital Reserve as outlined in the report attached, April the 6th, 2021. So I would ask you to vote with your icons in favor or against that. That is carried, colleagues. Thank you. We'll now vote to approve the summary of the Committee of the Whole on April 13th, 2021. And there are two additional items from the closed committee. So these are items 1 through 17. I see no questions, so if you would use your icons to vote yes or no. That is carried. Thank you, colleagues. Now we're going to vote to approve the summary from the Audit Committee on April the 19th. This is moved by Councillor Strickland and seconded by Councillor Jowett. And that basically is approving the consolidated financial statements, the sinking fund financial statements, the trust fund financial statements for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2020, as set out in the attached report, April 19th, 2021. That is carried, colleagues. We're now going to vote to approve a summary of from the Committee of the Whole meeting on April the 20th regarding the regional official plan. And we will take item 1 separately because this is the item that Councillor Jowett has a conflict on. So voting on item 1, which is the report that contains draft regional employment lands and employment conversion recommendations, if you could vote on that. That is carried. Thank you. And colleagues, now we'll vote on the remainder of the summary from the whole public meeting, again on April the 20th. This is moved by Councillor Galloway and seconded by Councillor Mann. And it's items, just item 2. Which is the major transit station area boundaries and the density targets for Laurier, Waterloo Park, Block Line, and Delta major transit stations. That is carried, colleagues. Mr. Lochner, do you have anything to report at this time?
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Okay, I have nothing. Regional Clerk, do you have anything to report? No, okay. Other matters under consideration are the development charges bylaw appeal, St. John's, Kilmarnock. We'll now vote on this recommendation. It is moved by Councillor Nowak and seconded by Councillor Shantz. The recommendation is that the Regional Municipality of Waterloo approve the attached memorandum of understanding with the Corporation of St. John's, Kilmarnock School in regard to its appeal of the region's development charges bylaw 19-037 as set out in report PDL LEG-21-20 dated April 21st, 2020. That is carried, colleagues. There is a report on the Parkway supply system update. That is for information only. And Mr. Schmidt and Ms. Nancy Kudasek are here to introduce the report and answer any questions. Nancy and Thomas, thank you for hanging in.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't believe Nancy is here. I gave her the night off, so she didn't have to sit through.
You're a good person, Mr. Schmidt.
Through all of this. Essentially, what's happened is in the Parkway well system, we detected low levels of chromium in the drinking water. At all times, those levels were below the drinking water standard, and the water that was supplied to the public was always safe for drinking and met all of the requirements. What we've done as a precaution is shut down that well supply, and we are now working with the Ministry of Environment to determine sources of contamination and eventually develop a plan for bringing that supply back into service, which will be the subject of future reports.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you for that. I'll now entertain a motion for the Committee of the Whole to rise and Council to resume. This is moved by Councillor Strickland and seconded by Councillor Verbanovich. So please use your icons to vote yes or no. That is carried. Thank you. I am seeing Dr. Wong's face. I'm just trying to find her on the agenda. Oh, she's after. Okay. Sorry, Dr. Wong, you get to hang in just a little bit longer. I sort of panicked when I saw you. I thought maybe it was time. We'll now entertain a motion to adopt the proceedings of the Committee of the Whole. This is moved by Councillor Foxton and seconded by Councillor Galloway. Please use your icons to vote yes and no. That is carried. Thank you. Under motions, we have a motion by Councillor Clark on homelessness in Waterloo Region. Councillor Clark, I believe this motion is moved by you and seconded by Councillor Erb. If you'd like to speak to it, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And just briefly, because I do appreciate that it's getting late. Until quite recently, the majority of people who became homeless for primarily economic reasons relating to housing affordability. Through a number of programs and initiatives, we've been very successful as a region at preventing that kind of homelessness, or at least ensuring that people who experience that kind of homelessness have experiences that are brief and isolated. But what we're seeing now is a growing number of people whose needs go far beyond simple economic ones. And we're seeing our shelters becoming long-term housing for people who really need supports. We have some supportive housing in our region for people with experiences of chronic homelessness, but with a growing wait list of over 340 names, it's simply not enough. We're building the housing, but we need the investments of the province to build the support necessary to ensure that people with the greatest needs are not only housed, but housed appropriately and sustainably. So I won't read the motion. Everybody has it.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Erb, would you like to speak to it as the seconder?
Thank you, Chair Redmond. And just very briefly, I think Councillor Clark's notice of motion clearly highlights the challenges we're currently facing to meet the demands of those requiring housing and also having the adequate support services in place. And along with the money that we're getting to build the units, it's so important that we receive funding, provide the adequate support services to those being housed. The housing is the foundational piece, but the support services are what builds on the foundation so that those are housed, can continue to live independently and move on successfully to achieve some of the other social determinants of good health now that they are housed.
Thank you very much. I see no other speakers. I would just point out that, and we do have the motion written before us, and we did have a notice of motion, but that copies of this resolution be forwarded to area municipalities, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, the Ontario Municipal Social Services Association, and area MPPs and MPs. Seeing no further, go ahead, Councillor Bravanovich.
Yeah, just very quickly, I just want to thank Councillor Clark for excuse me, for bringing forward the motion. This is, we know, a growing challenge, particularly in the urban part of our region, although we're seeing encampments in different areas as well. And the only way it's going to get solved is through a combination of capital as well as operating programs such as this motion calls for. We know that over the last year in particular, the amount of issues that we're dealing with in terms of homelessness that are intermixed with both issues of addictions and mental health and so on are resulting in individuals with a high level of acuity that need these supports, and it's really going to be critical for growing regions like ours to be able to deal with this and support it and have those supports in place to support the most vulnerable in our communities.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further speakers, I know I saw a couple of thumbs up. Great initiative. Councillor Clark, thank you so much. Would you please use your icons to vote yes or no? That is unanimous, colleagues. Thank you. Next notice of motion is Councillor Erb. This is about election signs. And this is moved by Councillor Erb, and is this seconded by Councillor Galloway, I believe?
Yes.
Councillor Erb, would you like to speak to this? This is about election signs.
Madam Chair, I'd be in take direction from you or from council. I'm not sure how much time this conversation would take place with council. It's been a long 4 hours. People's screens are getting a little bit darker every minute. And I'm quite happy to have it deferred to another council meeting. We want to hear from Dr. Wong. There may be some information there. So I'm quite happy to have this removed from the agenda and dealt with at another council meeting if that can happen procedurally.
So at the risk of being too obvious and taking a privilege from the chair, I think it's a wonderful idea, but I really hope that this creates some goodwill because I think this is a very important motion. So I'm hoping that everybody will be engendered with support for this motion, and we will put it off to the next cycle of council.
There's no guarantee of that, Madam Chair.
Got a month to work on you, Sean. Okay, thank you, Councillor Erb, and I am assuming, Councillor Galloway, that that's acceptable to you as seconder. Okay, thank you. Any notices of motion? We've had a few today. Active, great involvement, colleagues. Unfinished business? Other business? Now, I would like to call on Dr. Wong and thank her for her patience and ask her if she would like to provide a COVID-19 update. Welcome, Dr. Wong.
Thank you, Chair Reconvene. Good evening, everyone. I hope you are all well. So I'd like to ask Kathy Prosh to bring up my slides. Thank you. If you could go to the first slide with the epi curve. Thank you. So, our situation remains precarious. Our rates remain high. Our weekly incidence rate remains around 100 cases per 100,000 per week. The weekly incidence rate for Ontario is around 185 cases per 100,000 per week. We are currently managing 586 active cases and 24 active outbreaks. Taking into account our interim data, our 7-day average for percent positivity is now at 5.6%. Our latest reproductive rate sits at 1, which means case rates are relatively stable, but this can change quickly. Cases of variants of concern continue to increase, and they continue to be the predominant strains in Waterloo region, just like they are in Ontario. These are the cases that are in yellow on the epi curve here. And as expected, following a rise in case numbers, hospitalizations and ICU admissions are now increasing, as are the number of cases and outbreaks in settings that are opened. If we go to the next slide, please. Just quickly, as our case rates have increased in Waterloo region, so too has the COVID-19 work done by public health staff behind the scenes. So from April the 5th to the 18th, public health has managed over 3,700 contacts, monitored 177 workplaces, monitored 138 groups or cohorts. These can include school cohorts, childcare cohorts, before and after school programs and post-secondary institutions, and investigated 67 long-term care, retirement home, and congregate settings. This next slide shows our testing rate in Waterloo region, which is in green compared to the rate in Ontario, and orange. Please disregard the what's at the end in red. That's incomplete data. But you do see that in the last few weeks, we have started to see a new trend where testing rates have deviated from the provincial average. There are a number of factors that could be contributing to this difference. We've seen a reduction in outbreaks in long-term care and retirement homes due to immunization, and there have been changes to testing requirements for these settings, which have contributed to a significant reduction in the need for broad-based and repeated testing. With the switch to online learning, there has also been a significant drop in school cohorts being dismissed and recommended for testing. There's also less testing in our region among seniors now. We have immunization coverage now of 90% of our 80%, of our 80 plus population, and 80% of our 70 plus population. On the other hand, you see that rates in Ontario have sort of stayed the same. There are large swaths of very populated areas in Ontario, such as in the GTA, which have had very high rates and sustained rates for longer. So the difference that we're seeing may not actually represent a significant concern. In other words, we may not close the gap, and that may be normal. But given what we're seeing, I thought it was important just to take the opportunity to encourage all residents who should be getting a test to get a test. If you are showing any symptoms of COVID-19, if you've been identified as a close contact of a case, or if you've taken a rapid test, which we are now seeing much more available in workplaces in the region, and you've screened positive on this rapid test, please book an appointment at one of our local testing centers. There are 4 testing centers in Waterloo region with a mix of evening and weekend hours. And also asymptomatic testing is also available at participating pharmacies for eligible groups. And if I go to the last slide now, in closing, we remain in a precarious situation. To protect ourselves and each other, we must all continue to try and stay at home as much as possible, minimize close contacts, and continue to follow all public health precautions diligently and consistently to slow the spread of COVID-19, especially with the variants. And if you are an employer, please have all employees who do not need to be at work work from home. And of course, when it is your turn, please get your vaccine as soon as it becomes available to you. So in closing, let's protect each other. Please stay home, stay safe, save lives. Thank you. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Wong. And I think we all saw on social media and in the paper that you got your shot of AstraZeneca.
Yes.
That was great to see. Councillor Vrvanovich.
Thanks very much, Chair Redmond, and thanks, Dr. Wong, for your presentation, and congrats. It's important that we're keeping our top doc healthy and safe. So it was great to see that, and a great reminder to the public, for those who are eligible, to take the first shot that's offered to them, regardless of which particular brand of vaccine that it is. I guess my question has to do, and it even came up from one of the delegations this evening, and it's been the question around Section 22 orders around workplaces that appears to have been the case in Toronto and Peel, where the medical officers of health have ordered those places closed. And there's been a fair bit of coverage in the media around the fact that we're not going down that path. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that. But part of what I guess struck me, because I went and actually looked at our pretty impressive website that has lots of good information. And if we use the same standards that the Toronto and Peel have used, in fact, there's only 4 workplaces that would have met that criteria of 5 or more right now, from what I can see. And while there were some larger incidents early on, in terms of all the other ones that are old outbreaks, most of them are from far earlier in the pandemic than now. So is that sort of part of the thinking and the rationale, is that we're not seeing the same scope of problem that they're seeing in Peel and Toronto, or at least not to the same degree?
Yes, thanks for the question. Well, definitely in Peel and Toronto, the situation is extremely dire. They have rates that are 3 to 4 times what our rates are here. It is an extraordinary measure to close down workplaces because you have seen a certain number of infections around, among the employees. Normally, when there are cases among employees, we do an investigation and we try to see if there's a linkage. Oftentimes, especially in large workplaces, there aren't necessarily linkages at all. It could just be because we do have higher rates in the community, and you could have sporadic cases. But we take up a cautious approach. And so whenever there's 2 cases in a workplace setting where you can't identify other obvious sources, oftentimes, if you think, look, we can't seem to identify other sources, but they were in the workplace together, you could consider that an outbreak. So as long as there's 2 or more cases in a workplace, even if there are, say, 5 others that are not related to workplace spread, you could have a workplace that then has on the dashboard 7 or 8 cases associated with it, because it's just the kind of the norm in terms of how you classify cases and outbreaks. Normally, when there are cases, they're isolated. We do an investigation. We look into it. We can have an on-site inspection. If there's not a sense that there's a continuing source of spread, in the workplace, if the measures are good, then closing a workplace and putting every worker, out of work for 10 days, and some of them may not have any sick leave. That is quite a significant step to take if you don't have a sense that there's really an ongoing risk in the workplace. And oftentimes, for most workplace outbreaks, there isn't. There's outbreak measures put in place, and there isn't further spread. So I think, a workplace closure, we know there have been times that public health has recommended closure, public health here locally has recommended closure of certain parts of workplaces, parts maybe where some cases look to be clustered. But, we haven't to date recommended full closures of workplaces, but it's always with respect to where we think there might be some ongoing risk. And certainly closures are always an option, but I think the option, the effect has to be proportionate to the risk. And especially, whether we think there is actually an ongoing risk in the workplace. So certainly these are extraordinary measures. They have not been employed before in Peel and Toronto, but they've never had such a serious situation in those two areas. So yes, my assessment at this point is, as I said to the press, at this time, I'm not considering doing that as a systematic measure, but I'll continue to monitor and see how our cases evolve. And certainly for individual workplaces, we won't hesitate if necessary. If we think there's an ongoing risk and a risk that cannot be mitigated by other measures, we would stop work or stop work in parts of that workplace. And so hopefully that gives you a bit of an overview of, the context in which a measure such as workplace closure would be considered.
And I'm really glad to hear that, because I know you've been very very pragmatic in terms of your decision making throughout the past 13 months. And I think it's that last part of your comment that maybe didn't get the same level of attention as the not willing to close. And it's the not willing to close at this time based on the information that we have is in my mind what's really relevant, and what the community should find some comfort in. Going back to your presentation, and if you can send us a copy of it after, that would be appreciated. But I just want to be clear: is part of the reason you think the testing numbers are down locally is because of the rapid tests, and they're not counted in the numbers, like the I'll call them the short swab PCR and the long swab, the brain tickler PCR
screening.
Yes,
screening.
I don't think so. I don't think it's had an impact yet. That's that would be as significant. It started not long ago. But certainly it's something where sometimes it's just a good reminder to people that even though they have a rapid test, if they have a positive rapid test, they need to get a confirmatory test at an assessment center. And some people may not realize that. So it was just because now we have this more and more in our businesses, I just wanted to emphasize that. I think most of the decrease in testing is normal due to the fact that we have very significant decreases in the number of tests that we do in long-term care homes and retirement homes. Before, there was very broad-based testing. You could have one case in a, say, 300, 400 people, and you would test. Because it was one case, it was automatically an outbreak, which is not the case anymore because of the very good rates of immunization among residents. And then you would test every 3 days and every 5 days. Like, it would be very, very significant amounts of testing, and that's changed recently. So I actually was anticipating a drop in testing But what I noticed is there was a divergence with the Ontario average. And I think this may be explained by the fact that there's very high rates right now in large parts of Ontario. This could be driving continual testing at a higher rate than maybe what an area like ourselves in terms of our rates could need in terms of testing. But because I can't be 100% sure, and I'm just wanting to make sure that people continue to be encouraged to get tested when they need to. Just wanted to use that as an opportunity to say we need to still be diligent about testing, and especially with the advent of more rapid testing in our community, it's best practice to continue to seek a confirmatory PCR test, even if you've tested positive with a rapid test.
Sure, but just to be clear in terms of what's being counted in the stats.
Oh yes.
And that's really what I was getting at is the ones obviously that happen like at the drive-through or at St. Mary's and so on for symptomatic people, that's counted in the testing numbers.
That's right.
The ones that are done in pharmacies and sent away for results for asymptomatic people, i.e. in order to get, it was the 7-day test to access, congregate settings. Were those counted in the numbers as well?
Yes, those are counted as well.
Okay. But what I'm thinking maybe is not being counted, and this is probably part of the reason, is many of the homes have moved away from those to the rapid tests.
That's correct.
And so, if you're visiting someone now, you have to do a rapid test every 2 days as opposed to, a asymptomatic one once a week. But none of those every 2-day ones are being counted. So that's probably why you're seeing some of that reduction.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. So none of the rapid tests, whether positive or negative, are counted.
Okay.
And I do think that's what's contributing to a normal decrease here.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Councillor Jaworski, please go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair and more to share or delegate in favor of the rapid screening tests. Certainly the buses are out there. The Grand River Transit buses are out there. Happen to have one at Waterloo City Hall every other day. And last Saturday, I saw them setting up. And so I thought I'd take a walk over. And it was very simple, screening questions, got to know the team there. And it was a very simple swab, just of the front of your nose, much like if you were cleaning your ear with a Q-tip, snap it off, put it in, and leave your phone number. And they will call you if there's a positive result, and if there's negative, it'll show up in the report in the app. So I came home and I thought I better start up the app. And when we each got our vaccine, I know the vast majority of people have already got their vaccine or at least signed up for it. And the excitement of getting that sign up for your vaccine. Well, I can tell you, when you saw the tests, the rapid screening results on the screen, and it said negative, this is something you've never really thought about. Okay, I now know at that time I was actually negative because, we all do the precautions, and we're always extra careful, and we always think there's that 10% chance that maybe I just caught it. And it was just sort of an unbelievable relief. But right now, there's not enough people using those. And I think that's going to be part of the new normal going forward. So I think we need to, if everyone who's listening in, and I see there's not quite 600,000 viewers on YouTube right now watching us, but there's some, that, trying to get people to go ahead and use it, business owners to try it out, and just to see how truly simple it is. And once you've logged in and into that app, you can actually set an appointment. So you don't have to answer the screening questions. You answer them in the app first. And then you just walk up to the bus and go in, get tested. Again, very simple. And I would strongly encourage my colleagues to try it out so that you can be advocates for it too, because I think if we're going to be going to Barrie Centre in the Square or Maxwell's Music House or the theater in Cambridge or any of those places, I think that'll be part of the new normal 2022. So I think we better all get used to it and promote it as soon as possible to build that understanding in the community of it. And I hope I didn't overstate things too far, Dr. Wong, and rapid testing and the value of it, just so simple.
I think when there's widespread availability of it, when it's very easy to access, when there's a frequency that's serial, they call it serial testing, that's put in place, that's when it can work really well. And as you kind of illustrated, when something is easy and accessible to do, then more people will likely do it. So that's a great thing. Yeah.
Thank you for that public announcement and being an ambassador, Councillor Jaworski. Good job. Councillor Jowett.
Because everything I wanted to ask was asked almost. I too had the test done, Dave, at the chamber office. People watching me stick something up my nose was a little intimidating because I didn't know what the result was going to be. So there was a big drum roll, and when it was negative, it was a huge amount of elation. So I'm very grateful for the test kits for sure. And I was going to ask if it had an impact, if we're seeing that, but yes, it's probably aggregate in there somewhere. And then I was going to ask you how you feel about the closures of the 5 or more, because I got people telling me that we should be, bringing the hammer down, and I'm saying no. We're trying to take a educate and awareness approach, and hopefully with the business community, we're doing a good job of some of that. So I appreciate your answers on that as well, Dr. Wong. What I am going to ask you now that I've gotten this far is. And it's rollout, so I don't want to get too much into detail because it's not really, supposed to be stuck on your shoulders as well as everything else. I just want to know how does supply look going forward over the next couple of weeks? Like shot 2 that people are getting worked up about. What's coming? How does it look in a general sense? You don't have to give me detail, but just how do you feel?
Sure. I would say until the end of April. We are getting less than we expected, and this is a national supply issue. This is nothing to do with Waterloo region alone, of Moderna and of Moderna, and we also, with the province prioritizing, and rightly so, some very significant hotspots in the GTA, for example. Our supply of Pfizer isn't going to go up. And so I would say for the next two weeks, we're going to still have limited supply. But what we heard on the news, as well as what I've heard from provincial officials, is that there's an expectation that Canada will be able to get much more Pfizer than originally anticipated in the month of May, starting as early potentially as the first week of May. So in that case, that's going to really allow us to, increase our rollout. Although it remains to be seen. I always want to be a little bit cautious because when there's every week we get some supply issue. Fortunately, Pfizer seems a lot more stable, but with Moderna and AstraZeneca, there have been more recently supply chain issues, right? So we recently got a good supply of AstraZeneca delivered to pharmacies in our region. We were able to have 61 pharmacies start to deliver AstraZeneca. That's significant, right? And we were able to get a few thousand doses for our family practices in the region that signed up to deliver AstraZeneca as well. And so that's very good. So right now we do have, a relatively good supply of AstraZeneca through the pharmacies and the primary care practices that are delivering it. But it's at this moment. So that helps a little bit with the decrease in Moderna that we're experiencing currently, and the less Pfizer that we have to work with right now. So I guess to make it short, in the next couple of weeks, it's still going to be pretty tight in terms of supply. It's not as much as we'd like to. And in fact, as mentioned, there's going to be a few days where, the clinics won't be able to run because we won't have enough supply. And those are dates that by and large people have not booked or anything. We're not, canceling or shutting down clinics that people have largely booked. But the outlook is good for May, and the outlook looks even better in June. So assuming that those things come true, then we should be able to continue to see some increase in supply over the next several weeks. And we're still on target, for example, to hit our goal of 40% of adults being immunized by May 5th, which was the original goal. So sorry, talking a bit too much, but looking up in the future, even if in the short term, it's a little bit less than we'd like.
I appreciate it.
Councillor Jawad, any further questions?
Thank you, Chair Redmond. I appreciate it. Thank you, Dr. Wong, for all you're doing. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Councillor Harris, please go ahead.
Yes, quickly, thank you, Dr. Wong, for your report. It's great to see stage 2, those essential workers moving into that new category. Definitely great to see the lowering of the age group plus 40. I got my shot on Tuesday when it became available for folks like myself. Encourage others to do the same if they can get an appointment. It was extremely easy to book at a pharmacy. I too want to echo Councillor Yaborski and Jowett's comments on the Stay Safe Screen program in conjunction with Communitech, the local chambers, Greater KW and Cambridge, led by Ian DeWaard, Ian McLean and Greg DeRocher and the folks at Communitech. Wonderful work there in piloting that program throughout the region. I know as an employer, I've received the rapid test to deploy out to our employees. I think it's just phenomenal. I hope that it's rolled out across the province. The bus, I know people that I have run into have used it. It's extremely quick and easy to use while you wait for your shots. So I think we're doing great things in the region. I look at the daily stats each day, and I'm thankful that our numbers are still point, unlike Peel, York, and Toronto. So keep up the good work on that. And again, a big congratulations to and thanks to the Chambers, Communitech for the excellent stepping up and providing those rapid tests to employers to keep their workers safe and healthy. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Shantz, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Wong. Just a question, I guess. What would you say to people that are worried about their second dose with the irregularity in the supply? I know at the beginning it was Pfizer that was short shipped, and now it's Moderna, and it's kind of up in the air. But what would you say to people that are concerned?
For the vast majority of people, there shouldn't be a problem to get their second dose on time because it's in 4 months. There are a very small number of people for whom it's been recommended that they get their second dose at the manufacturer's interval, and we take that into account when we open up bookings slots and open up clinic days, so that we can be assured that those who need to get their second dose earlier, like in a month's time, have the ability to be booked in a month's time. But the vast majority of people are going to get it in 4 months' time from their first dose. And by then, our supply and supply chain issues should be better. And there shouldn't be an issue with the amounts that we're expecting. Especially now that we know that we're going to get more Pfizer, and Pfizer has been very stable now for a number of weeks.
Thank you. Councillor Galloway, please go ahead.
Go away, yeah.
It's not what I meant.
I've gotten worse. It's okay. Thanks, Madam Chair. Dr. Wong. Anyways, so the improvements to the dashboard, I think, are excellent, and some of the changes to the dashboard, and specifically, I'm wondering, we're now seeing on a daily basis on the dashboard how many shots the pharmacies are providing, although there's an extra day lag in that, I believe, compared to our own. But will we be able to track the shots coming out of the primary care offices?
Yes.
How do we achieve the 40% or the 75% if we, how do we know how we're doing if we don't have the primary care numbers?
Yes.
Or are they being included now? I
Yes.
don't see them.
Yes,
Okay.
they're actually already included. They're not very large right now because that primary care is just ramping up. So, we have a few thousand doses, but it's they're still in the process of ramp. A few thousand doses of AstraZeneca for primary care. So they're already included. What happens is because primary care is because we receive the vaccine, the health unit for primary care, it's logged in the system such that when they deliver a dose, it's automatically logged into the original graph. So it's already in there. And the pharmacy distribution, because it's a separate distribution chain, so to speak, that's why we had to create a separate graph for them because we couldn't pull from the same database. So the pharmacy had to be separated that way and then added to the totals on the summary page. But any doses going forward now that are delivered by primary care, they're already included in our graph.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Galloway, and I do apologize. I wasn't asking you to go away. Really, I wasn't. Thank you very much, Dr. Wong. I see no other speakers or questioners. Colleagues, there is a motion for closed and with regard to Indigenous education sessions, and it's suggesting closed meetings for council, and it has a list of dates through May and into June, several occasions, and it's education related to Indigenous issues and reconciliation. And this is moved by Councillor Clark and seconded by Councillor Galloway, so I would ask you to vote yes or no. I just remind council that education issues are appropriate for closed. That is carried. Thank you, colleagues. Are there any questions? Seeing none. Oh, sorry, Councillor Erb. No, okay.
Oh, sorry. Didn't come down from the last time.
Thank you. We'll now start a vote to approve the bylaws as listed. This is moved by Councillor Rentz and seconded by Councillor Nowak. And they are A through G. So I'd ask you to use your icons to vote yes or no. That is carried. Colleagues will now entertain a motion to adjourn. This is moved by Councillor Mann, seconded by Councillor Strickland. I would ask you to please use your icons for yes or no. That is always a very popular motion. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Councillor Jaworski. Great discussion, important issues, really productive delegations from the community. I'm always blown away at how thoughtful our community is in providing productive and proactive things for us to mull over. So thank you all. This meeting is adjourned.
Right. Now I'm going to go away.
Good night.
Good night.
Promise.